I do believe does promote growth and prosperity for our community. One of their big sponsors is the Canadian Institute of Planners. But then my report claims that the planning department doesn't really see it as a, I guess, tool for growth. But I think we just declared climate change a concern of ours. I think there's opportunities there for how we can manipulate the environment to impact some of the climate change. I've brought forward, on behalf of ACAP, the rain garden, so I think that would be an excellent initiative for us. I would like to have it considered. And the other big sponsor for it is Canadian Parks and Recreation, and that's what it is. It's Parks and Recreation, so that's one thing. And the other thing is 5.5, and I feel like for anybody who knows what a record is, a broken one, because every year I get these reports and every year I complain about them. I get them twice a year and I complain about them. So when I read my report and I see on it continuous improvement, we follow a maintenance life cycle program. No, that's not continuous improvement. So response to year-to-date actuals, we have a shortfall. No, I'd like a bit more of a response than that. High-level performance service objectives, blank? No, I want more than that. Year-to-date performance service targets, blank? No, I need a little bit more than that. Emerging issues, ongoing maintenance of building? No, I need more than that. So, and the summary for takeaways for Common Council, blank. So these are almost useless to me. So unless we can get some education or send them back, but the ABCs need to know how to fill these out. Apparently they don't. The information that I need, this is not helpful. So that's my rant again, my biannual rant on these reports. So I'll leave it at that and hope for better in October. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Maybe just in reverse, I have a comment on 5.3 as well. On the written reports, I just wonder, City Manager, if I could have you just talk to your views and I think what you call your fundamental review and what you see in the next number of months. Could I have you just speak to that?
Your Worship, members of Council, you'll recall that in the 2019 work plan for the city staff, we have committed to undertake a fundamental review of the ABCs. That is not code for we're just going to take a look at structures. We're going to take a look at everything to do with ABCs, including the governance, how we interact, and yes, Councillor Reardon, the reporting architecture that we currently have with them. So your broken record, to use your term, has not been lost on the staff, and we will be taking a look at how we can address this moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, City Manager. And just Councillor Reardon's comment on 5.3, I did when I was reading the report, Councillor, I just wanted to highlight to those in the audience and those at home that despite the fact that this year we're not going to participate in the Communities in Bloom, I would argue that we really are participating because we're going to have 90,000 annual flowers and 110 hanging baskets, and anyone that's been in many areas of the city, I think, remark that we do a pretty phenomenal job. So shout out to our folks there. So I think I'm not arguing with the point that you made, just that I don't want it to appear to those at home or in the audience here that it means we're going to not plant anything this year. There's quite a bit of work that will continue. So thank you. Okay, I don't see any other lights. Then on the question of consent, which is on the floor, all those in favor? Aye. Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any, thank you. And I turn your mic off. There you go, next item, please.
Your Worship, item 6, members' comments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to have a shout out to One Change and Nick Nicole, the Old North End. They had a cleanup on Saturday. I was unable to attend this year's event, but I understand it was a great turnout. They got rid of a lot of garbage, and they had a good time as well. So hats off to them. In Crescent Valley, there'll be a cleanup on June the 14th for the kids of Hazen White St. Francis. Are going to get out and help with that, and there'll be music and snacks, and some lucky class is going to win a special treat. And on the 15th, Saturday, from 11 till 2, that's when the community itself will take on the rest of that cleanup. There'll be a barbecue, door prize, the green machine will be on site, city staff will be helping out. So hats off to both those communities, and I'd like to see the communities, get out there, especially the kids, get out there and clean it up in the springtime. It makes a big difference. So we thank you very much, and have a good time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Worship. Just remember the fair taxation report on the city website. It's under council priorities. Please look that up. It affects everybody in the province of New Brunswick. I want to congratulate and thank all the residents that showed up to the Funday Solid Waste Commission open house. There was a great turnout of 80 to 100 people. It was very informative, and it's just the first of a long process for that to happen, for the residents to get informed and involved. And number 3, I want to thank the road work on the west side being done. We got the Manawaganish Road done, and it's just the beginning of some new paved roads. Rossay's on its way, so getting the work done early this year. So we want
Rossay Avenue, you mean, Councillor?
what did I say?
Rossay.
Oh, Rossay Avenue, yeah. Rossay can fend for themselves. We're not sending any pavement out to Rossay.
I just wanted to
Just Rossay Avenue, thank you. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Every meeting, I usually have a request for the folks at home to support their Cherrybrook Zoo, and I will ask that again. But I have a second request for anybody watching and who also happens to be friends with my wife on Facebook, because she doesn't watch us, to let her know I said happy anniversary. Colleen and I are celebrating 24 years together today, kind of together.
Yeah.
So if you can message her and tell her I said happy anniversary, please. Well, thank you to Mike Hugenholtz, Tim O'Reilly, and many other staff. I spent much last Thursday evening with them and users of our arenas talking about regionalization and ICE. And what a tough but good conversation that was. The majority of the ICE users certainly understand, and the sense I got was believe in what we believe in a Plan A regional strategy, and many were asking about who to talk to and and many from outside of the city of St. John plan to go back and have further the conversation in their community about how important a regional strategy is. So certainly thanks to our city staff who were there to lead the conversation, and all of the ICE volunteers who were there, because ultimately they're there because they want to work with the youth and others about being physically fit, and they're volunteers, the majority in the room. It was a very good conversation. And certainly coming off a tough winter, and if anybody heard the CBC interview this morning with the folks at the Cherrybrook Zoo, now is the time when they certainly need our support and your support. If you were thinking about registering your children for the summer camps, don't wait. They'd love to have your registration now. I know my daughter missed out last summer on the one she wanted to go to because it was full. So the weather's getting better. You can get out and visit Ville the Wallaby. If you want, you can, like a teacher I was talking to at St. John High School this past week who didn't realize you could buy a family pass and go whenever you want. And then he came back 2 days later and said, I bought a family pass, so now my family's going to spend lots of time at the zoo this summer. Now's the time to get out, and please continue to support your Cherrybrook Zoo. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Strobridge.
Thank you. Just quickly want to recognize the community of Redhead. Councillor Meredith, you and I helped plan spring cleanup out there. That was just held on Saturday. St. John Fire Department was there. They did the barbecue cooking, so thank you to them. City of St. John, of course, Municipal Services staff for coming out and picking up all of the garbage that was collected and the litter. And finally, of course, to Canaport LNG, because it was their support and funding that made it all happen. So thank you to them, and thank you to the people of Redhead for participating. Next Saturday, is it right, Dave? Next Saturday?
Yes, next Saturday from 10 to 12.
From 10 to 12, Champlain Heights Community Association is also holding a annual spring cleanup and barbecue and community celebration will be held at the Swanton Street Playground. So Swanton Street in Champlain Heights in the lovely and fabulous Ward 4. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the first thing I'll mention is the large hole in the building adjacent to us. It's a really exciting step in the development on our waterfront, and it's a really good sign of growth. I know we're all looking forward to having Area 506 happen there in a few weeks, months. One thing I'll mention is that I think the St. John Night Market had an amazing kickoff last week. Attendance was into the thousands. And I know that most of the vendors sold out of what they had, and I think it's a really great step in showing the invigoration, the excitement in our uptown and our Central Peninsula as well. I'll also just quickly a self-gratifying note: the Heart and Stroke Foundation held one of their largest annual fundraiser, Heart and Stroke Foundation of New Brunswick, in Moncton this year, with lots of St. John teams involved in the Hockey Heroes weekend, where they raised just over $860,000, making their 8-year total for the event $5.5 million. So thank you to all the St. John teams that were involved. It was a huge success. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to say thank you and congratulations to Discover St. John. They've brought a number of conferences to the city, and last week they had the National IODE in St. John, and I think every member that went out to the restaurants and went shopping and around the city had a wonderful time and loved it. So, of course, it was mostly all women, few men, but they certainly went around the city and were able to see everything, and that's great, because that's what we want for our cities this summer, for more people to come in and visit. The other issue, I'd like to say congratulations to some of the folks from UMBSJ, because they're here this evening, and last Friday they had the graduation of over 300 graduates here in our city, and of course they had a number more in Fredericton. And Dr. Eddie Campbell, who's here this evening, President, we want to wish him well in his future endeavors, because our graduation here last Friday was his last graduation for New Brunswick. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Speaking of graduation, before we get there, high school students have exams next week, and we're wishing them the very best of luck as they head into a week-long of exams. So make sure they study, get out there, apply yourself. So any of those high school students that are heading into that, we wish you the very best as you head into exam season, and make your parents and teachers proud and just crush those exams. Also, three folks that we should say thank you to for helping save lives, and I know Chief Clifford in the back would certainly echo that. But the New Brunswick Association of Fire Chiefs issued only 3 certificates of courage during their 2019 conference, ranking St. John's 3 an elite list of members to earn the decoration. So congratulations to Senior Firefighter Scott Gogan, Captain Carl Conrad, and Senior Firefighter Trevor Price for their life-saving efforts. And we acknowledge those, and thank you to our first responders. So over to you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would also echo that the night market was, it hit a home run for sure. It was busy all night, and I want to thank staff, because there was a lot of staff there, and I know Ian Fogan, I think, was there all night. I had a meeting that night, so I was there before my meeting, then I was there after my meeting, and he was still there. So, and a lot of the vendors, there was no food left by the time I got back to it. There was a bit of beer left, but that was about it. So it was a really successful night. And the other thing I just wanted to mention, that for people who are watching, I'm sure a lot of people know Father Raymond Stack. He turned 90 on the 18th of May, so it was also Loyalist Day. And I wanted to say congratulations to him. He was the priest down here at St. John the Baptist Church for, I think, 17 years, and those were in the years when my kids were little, and I was dragging them off to Mass. So he has been a big, huge part of our family's life, with baptisms and confirmations and all those things. So, and this year he'll celebrate 63 years of being ordained a priest. So congratulations to Raymond. I just think the world of him. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so thanks. That wraps up. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes before our public hearings start. So I can I could juggle or I could do all kinds of things. So just a couple of comments, I guess, just on the note of just staff. We just had folks go around the table. We had a finance meeting last, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, and there's so many very strong initiatives being driven forward, arts and culture type supportive initiatives like a night market that didn't exist 90 days ago and has now been brought forward, and we're hearing about a very successful outcome in its first weekend. The finance committee, the long-term financial planning, the capital planning. And my point, I guess, is just to say a huge thank you to all of our staff, the leadership, all of the folks, from the folks that make our streets look great and clean them up, all the way to the senior managers here in the rooms with us many nights. Just a tremendous thank you. It's not always easy in the roles, but we certainly appreciate everything that you're doing. So thank you very much. Common Clerk, do you have a suggestion for a quick item?
Your Worship, I would guess that the 13s might be the quickest if the chair of the Finance Committee is able to.
Yeah. So we're, okay. So we've got 3 or 4 minutes. So anything? No, those are two. Those are two. Okay, so we'll just pause maybe for a minute or two.
13.1.
Yeah.
13.1.
Can we try 13.1, Councillor? Okay. Okay, Common Clerk, yeah.
So 13.1, Your Worship's Finance Committee Safe Clean Drinking Water Project Reserve Fund.
Okay, sorry, Councillor, let me get your mic. There we go.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the Finance Committee is recommending that we withdraw from the Safe Clean Drinking Water Reserve Fund. The money's there for final payment on the Safe Clean Drinking Water debt. Starting years ago, Safe Clean Drinking Water, in its infancy, we decided as a council to put monies forward into a fund, a reserve fund. And that allowed us to do a couple of things. Save before we spent, okay? So we saved up a portion of this, over $20 million, a fairly big portion of this project, Safe Clean Drinking Water project, before we went and spent it. It also allowed us to save a ton of interest, okay? Not only we make interest on the monies while it sat there and accumulated, we'll save interest for, excuse me, please, for decades on the monies we would have borrowed. But at this time, Council, the conclusion of the project is in front of us, and we'll need to make final payments, and so this money is warranted to be removed from the reserve fund. Any questions, concerns?
Okay, somebody move the
I'll move
recommendation.
the recommendation.
Okay, moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, on the question, all those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you to staff.
Okay, thank you. 6:28. We want to try maybe 13.2? Common Clerk, can you call that item?
So 13.2, Your Worship's Finance Committee's recommendation with respect to reallocation of the 2019 capital funding Canada Games Aquatic Centre.
Councillor Merrithew?
Yes, thank you again, Your Worship. So this might take a little longer than 2 minutes, but we'll start the process, and I'd like to finish it as well. So it's recommended by your Finance Committee, the Common Council approve a reallocation of $28,000 capital to the Canada Games Aquatic Centre for from the accessible lift project to 2 projects, motion detector lighting and flow monitors for water. So if Council recalls, a while back, I think it was the LBR had a project and asked to keep, and the project was under budget and asked to keep the monies. And Council turned that request down. This is a little different, where the Aquatic Center went out and found, through 2 different grants, $28,000 of this monies, all right? And so they're asking that they could reallocate that $28,000 to 2 separate projects that have an ROI, that have a return on investment, okay? As simple as their flow monitors for their water, there's a lot of water in the Aquatic Center, and being able to turn their lights off when no one's there. The lights are constantly on there, so both of them should bring down utility bills. That's the background of the motion.
Okay, thank you.
That finance is putting forward. So if I could have someone move it.
Okay, moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions on the
Any
motion? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just pause and talk 6:30, right on the button.
Didn't even take-
Okay.
Perfect,
There you
okay,
go.
thank you. Common Clerk?
Your worship, 6:30, we've advertised public hearings, so the first would be 9.1 on the agenda, and it's a proposed municipal plan zoning bylaw text amendment and a rezoning in section 59 amendment to 85, 89, and 310 Retail Drive with a PAC report recommending approval. And I just remind council that this particular file has a staff presentation associated with it.
Okay, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen in the gallery and I guess at home, just so you know the process, and for us, so just what we're going to do tonight is we're going to have a quick presentation from staff at the beginning of each of the public hearing items tonight. Then we're going to enter into the public hearing, and we're going to have those wishing to speak both, or perhaps in against the amendments, and those wishing to speak for the amendments. And if we have questions for the presenters other than staff, we can ask questions of staff after the presentation. But those speaking either opposed or in favor of, we'll ask those questions of those individuals while they're at the podium, because once they've left the podium, that portion of that presentation will be over. So first I'll ask Ms. Hamilton just to introduce the quick verbal update.
Yes, Your Worship and members of council, tonight is a public hearing to consider a plan amendment, rezoning, and Section 59 amendment application by Horizon Management to consider multiple unit residential development within the East Point development area. Tonight we have Mr. Mark Reed, who is the senior planner and staff planner on the file, that's here to give a brief presentation and overview of the staff recommendation and PAC recommendations before you this evening.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reed, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. The application before you this evening with respect to the applicant's request for Retail Drive, it's both a broad level, and at a broad level, we're looking at amending the municipal plan policies around regional retail centers to provide for residential development in these areas, and also introducing a new zone to the zoning bylaw to allow for residential development in a regional retail center context. Site-specific, we're rezoning 3 parcels to allow for residential development and amending the existing Section 59 conditions to provide for the applicant's proposal for residential uses on the East Point site. This is an air photo here showing the site. In terms of the area where they're proposing the residential, this is a map here showing the development. Sobeys would be in the upper right, Costco, the large building, in the lower left, and Chapters off on the upper left. The 2 areas with the red circles are the areas where Horizon Management is proposing to introduce residential land uses in the form of a building that would have commercial uses on the ground floor and then residential uses up above on 3 development sites. One is the undeveloped area in the central portion of the site. Now there's an existing building on that parcel containing Goji's and Pizza Stone. And then there's 2 parcels down on this map in the lower left corner in the area adjacent to Costco that are currently undeveloped that the applicant is proposing for residential development. In terms of the main parcel, this is the area here. Goji's and Pizza Stone would be down in the lower right. East Point Way runs in there from that intersection. The applicant is proposing, there'd be a residential building in here, another one over here along this internal access way, and then there'd be another 2 buildings in the more central portion of the site around potentially a green space, clubhouse, or future commercial development. Site photos, this is the main area of the site here, largely undeveloped. There is some existing multi-unit development now in the East Point site with the Hampton Inn and Suites that was constructed a few years ago, so the proposed multi-story buildings aren't out of context. This is the second site at the corner of Oakland Avenue and Retail Drive. It's currently undeveloped. The applicant is proposing this as an additional site for incorporating residential uses. And as well, there's a third site here in the foreground. This photo is taken from the Costco parking lot. The third site would be adjacent to the manufactured housing development on the opposite side of Retail Drive. The site currently is designated Regional Retail Center, as are a large part of the lands in this area of the city. This encompasses McAllister Mall, former Parkway Mall, the Walmart development, and some lands along Rossay Avenue as well in McAllister Drive. There's also a second area of regional retail along Fairville Boulevard as well. That with the policy amendments in the plan, residential development there would be supported through a future rezoning. Currently, within regional retail centers, residential development isn't permitted. One of the things we realize as planners is that with the advent of things such as online shopping, the retail landscape is changing. There's a lot less built bricks and mortar retail, if you will. Across North America, we've seen an evolution in retail centers where places such as the Yorkdale Mall in Toronto, Don Mills in Toronto, a lot of those centers are being redeveloped with a residential component to them as commercial land uses, as leases change and as commercial land uses vacate. This tends to be a mixed-use development because you already have that core of daily services that you need. A lot of these areas, East Point's a prime example. You have a grocery store, you have a pharmacy, you have Costco that provides, some higher order daily needs. You have a bookstore, you have some restaurants, there's a liquor store, there's a bank. So a lot of those daily needs are there. So adding residential to that mix really helps build that mixed-use development concept we're looking for as planners, and it helps to represent, a compact urban form as well. Basically, this mixed-use development meets the municipal plan goals, and we're proposing some new policy that would permit this type of development in regional retail centers through a rezoning. The site right now is zoned regional retail center. That's basically our shopping center zone, if you will, allowing for large format retail. What we're proposing for this particular application is a new zone. It's called Regional Commercial Residential, and that would allow for the same uses that can be built on site today in terms of large format retail, and it also allows for multiple unit residential dwellings with the residential units up above on a second floor or third or fourth or higher floor. So it gets that mixed use type of building in that commercial style of development. Basically, this zone would apply to 3 parcels on the site, and it would be also available to other landowners such as McAllister Place or the corporation that runs Lancaster Mall through a rezoning process if the market was there in other areas of the city as well. One of the issues that did come up in staff's review of the application were servicing and traffic considerations. The applicant has provided a servicing study. The main issue there was the sanitary sewer. We reviewed the downstream sanitary sewer on Retail Drive with our model using some theoretical flows. There were some capacity concerns identified with a 50-meter segment of sewer. So we're proposing a Section 59 amendment to have the developer do some further analysis, working with city staff to identify further the nature of that capacity constraint and what upgrades are required and what the trigger point for those upgrades are. The applicant also completed a traffic impact study. One of the key findings isn't a surprise. It's the Rossay Avenue, Ashburn Lake Road, Retail Drive intersection. There's currently some existing operational considerations there in the peak hours. Predominantly, the big issue the traffic impact study found was the weekday afternoon peak hours, so that 4 to 6 p.m. time slot where folks are going home from work. There's quite a bit of capacity, quite a bit of congestion and delay there. Currently, that there's left turns from Retail Drive and Ashburn Road. They're currently running about 10% over capacity. Now, when we do a traffic study, one of the things we examine is what happens in the future if we do nothing with background growth. And under that scenario, basically, those intersections would generally run at about 130% of capacity in 2028. With the full proposal from the developer added commercial and the 400 dwelling units, those would generally be running, those two left turn movements would generally be running at about 40% over capacity, which is, quite a, it's about a 30% increase over what we see today. The developer's done some sensitivity analysis, and, this is an area that, the city studied quite a few years, and there are some improvements on the books that we are working towards. And what the developer's consultant looked at was what happens if we just built 200 dwelling units and the proposed commercial. And that case isn't as bad. It's running about 20% over capacity, so it's another 10% capacity that we're exceeding the intersection by over the current case in that evening afternoon peak. The study also looked at the Retail Drive Westmoreland Road intersection and the Retail Drive East Point Way intersection, and there were a few improvements there, with the 400 units in the development that are proposed that could trigger improvements. So given this, one of the recommended Section 39 conditions was to limit it at 200 dwelling units, which is more manageable from a traffic impact perspective, and also allows time for any required bigger picture intersection or transportation network improvements to come to fruition. So staff are recommending some Section 59 conditions through an amendment to the existing agreement. The first is to allow for residential use on the site and a limitation to 200 residential units. Now, with the residential building types where you have multi-story buildings, there's an existing cap on the East Point development of 600,000 square feet. One of the concerns from the developer is the 600,000 square feet. Their initial thoughts were this was all going to be a one-story development. So if you start building multi-story residential units, that floor area gets eaten up fairly fast. So given that, they've requested basically an amendment that would basically increase that cap from 600,000 for the entire site to 820,000. That works out to, given there's some different ownership with Costco and Hampton Inn and Suites, it turned into a bit of an accounting exercise in the PAC report with respect to floor area. So basically that cap would go up to 625,000 for the East Point parcels. And a lot of that is just apartments on the upper levels of those buildings. We are also recommending a sewer capacity review from the developer, and city staff will work through and review that as the developer progresses. And also that any proposed changes to driveways along Retail Drive be subject to a traffic impact review by the consultant. Public engagement, where this was a plan amendment, we had advertising in February associated with the public presentation for the plan amendment, and then the public hearing was advertised in May. We circulated a letter to area landowners in early May as well. To date, we haven't received any letters. The applicant was at the PAC meeting, expressed agreement with the recommendation, and we had a local area landowner attend the meeting as well with some questions around an adjacent driveway to the site. Staff recommendation was to amend the municipal plan to change the policy framework to provide for residential development, also to amend the zoning bylaw with the new zone and to rezone the three parcels, and also to amend the Section 59 agreement, as outlined earlier in the proposal with respect to the floor area, traffic, and sanitary sewer concerns. PAC, there was a slight recommendation around this with respect to the floor area, and that's covered off in the letter from the PAC chair, so that staff have no concern with that change. And that's the presentation in a nutshell. If there are any questions, I could entertain those.
I think we're going to hold questions for staff until after the public hearing. So thank you very much, Mr. Reid. Okay, well, thank you for that update. So I'm going to call just to make sure if there's any members here in the gallery. So this is the proposed municipal plan amendment, zoning bylaw, text amendment, and rezoning, and section 59 amendments for 85 to 89 and 310 Retail Drive with. So I'm going to ask if there's anyone wishing here to speak in opposition to these amendments. Okay, I'm going to ask again if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to these amendments. Okay, and I'll ask one final time if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to these amendments. Okay, not seeing anyone. Thank you. I'll flip to the other side. I'm asking if there's anyone here wishing to speak in favor of these amendments. Okay, great. Thank you. You can go to the podium and state your name for the record.
Yes,
sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's Steve Carson. I'm with Develop St. John. As you know, we were established about a year and a half ago to champion and in many regards instigate real estate development and tax-based growth in our community, particularly projects that are consistent with the city's municipal plan. We've been working with the proponent of this project since the early days of our organization. Obviously, the East Point has become one of the largest tax base generators for the city over the last 10 or 15 years, and we wanted to pursue ways with them to continue that investment. As was mentioned in the staff report, retail is, the landscape of retail is changing dramatically. And as we look at models across North America that are really creating communities around retail centers now, and really that neighborhood experience to really change from just a clear shopping destination, but more of an experiential and residential situation. So we believe, as we look at that change, that East Point is kind of that ideal candidate for us to enter into this next vision of retail centers, particularly with the high quality of design, landscaping, that they've really set raised the bar across Atlantic Canada for that standard. And so we believe that, that will really bode well for kind of creating that into a really desirable place to live and really create that kind of Main Street approach to commercial shopping center design. I just to close off, wanted to share with you some recent statistics from CMHC, which are really speak to the strength of our market right now. So obviously we're on a population growth. We're getting some modest growth in our population for the first time in the last few years, which is really positive. But in recent years, the St. John market from an apartment and rental perspective has been challenged with keeping up with demand, particularly over the past 5 years. The rental vacancy rate has declined from 11.3 to 3.7, major decline over the last 3 years. And we have had some, obviously, growth in supply during that time, but not to the extent that the market demands. Interesting enough as well, vacancy for newly constructed buildings since 2000 has declined from 6.7% to 1.1%, which is really no vacancy. And CMHC's vacancy for newly constructed buildings on the east side is currently at 0%. So it, again, just speaks to the pent-up demand and for quality residential development and obviously the ensuing tax-based growth that goes from that. So we're here tonight to speak in favor of staff's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carson. Okay, any questions for Mr. Carson? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll ask again if there's anyone else wishing to speak in favor of these amendments tonight. Okay, thank you. Come on.
Just a matter of
Yep, come on up.
I'm the proponent. Is this where I speak?
Yes, it is, sir. Yep, you come right up to the microphone if you would, and just introduce yourself, and off you go.
Okay. My name is John Wheatley, and I'm here representing Horizon Management, the applicant. And Rod Adams is also with me here tonight as well. He's also with our group. We've obviously read the staff report and PAC report, and we agree with its findings and recommendations. I'd just like to add that I think the staff and PAC have done a very good job at analyzing our application, understanding the changing nature of retail developments, not just in this area, but around North America. And I want to thank them for the support they provided to us. And obviously the changing demographics, changing retail purchasing has made the retail developments have to adapt to that. And we're hopeful that this will continue to make developments such as East Point to be viable and a healthy contributor to the economy, and make sure that we are able to offer the various service offerings that we do in our line of business, and to help continue to support the tax base of the city. So having said that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wheatley. We have a question. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just curious, Mr. Wheatley, in the package it says there won't be any land for public purposes because there's no subdivision. And I was just down to Dartmouth Crossing, and I noticed they have a gigantic playground. Are you looking at any of those sorts of things for amenities as well with the development?
Yes, we're looking at, I guess, activities and spaces that would be appropriate for our size of development. I think perhaps you already know we run a Saturday morning farmers market in one area of the development. We have located in a couple of containers a ice rink with its own ice plant and ice surface that we are looking for a place to locate somewhere appropriately within the development. I would say those are probably the two main things that we are looking at doing, and I think everybody's familiar with the other general, the general nature of East Point with its landscaping. We've got pretty good sidewalks. We're located on bus routes. We've got a pretty, I think, a balanced development. But yes, those are the kinds of things that we are looking at. We also own some of the land above East Point. If you know where the big rock wall is behind the development, we own some land up there. And we have some thoughts about, could we at some day develop a walking trail up there, because it offers very good panoramic views of the eastern part of the city. So yes, we have some ideas of how we can continue to enhance the development, definitely.
I just thought the playground was genius in some ways, because usually there's one parent that doesn't like to shop, and mostly kids aren't crazy about shopping, so it allows, one parent to be outside entertaining the kids and the other one shopping. It just seemed to make sense. And I know it's interesting as I watch these developments, because they are trying to replicate what a lot of downtowns had, and are trying to revive the shopping area that has residential with it as well. Now, when I was at Dartmouth Crossing, I also noticed that they have the real concrete pavers. Have they got those incorporated up at East Point as well?
Concrete pave.
But like on the sidewalks, it's all the little concrete pavers and that.
I think most of our sidewalks, they're patterned, but they're mostly poured concrete. I don't think they're, Rod, can you help me? I don't think we have many pavers. We certainly have, designs embedded in the concrete and different colors to enhance the appearance, yes.
It just seems to be, I guess, a template. I thought it was just, like a template like Dartmouth Crossing. You see them, they're always sort of similar, but have their differences. Now, what about the building? Are you looking at any like a LEED standard or anything with your residential buildings?
We're going to do some more, obviously, building design and market studies once we get the approval. Hopefully tonight we'll get the approval to move forward, and we'll then have a better idea of what the buildings will be like. But certainly we're going to keep them in line with the overall design concept of East Point, and maintain that architectural distinction that we have at East Point. That's certainly our intention.
Yeah, I think like the LEED strategy would be, using energy efficient strategies and all those. It's a designation for buildings. I don't think St. John. Well, actually, the parking garage has a LEED certification. So, and the police station would have LEED certification. Anyways, no, it's good. I mean, if you have a shopping area, you need customers, and so I guess it's a marriage made in heaven in some ways. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. John, Mr. Wheatley, yeah, I guess you can hear me all right. Do you have any issues with the flooding? Just so the public will know, when you build these buildings, you're looking after if there's any issues on flooding in that area, or is it too far up in the hill?
We don't have any issues because of our elevation with flooding, but when the site was conceived and originally approved, there were some pretty extensive requirements we had to meet for stormwater management. And because most of these stormwater management devices are underground, nobody sees them.
Yeah.
But when we developed the site, we had to ensure that the flow off of the site post-development could be no more than it would be after the development was there. And to meet that, we have 3 major stormwater control features. One that most people don't know about is, if you're familiar with the Indigo store, the area in front of Indigo between what we call our 2 fashion buildings, underneath the ground is a very large underground reservoir that captures the rainfall in the site, and it's metered down into the area down by the Kent store at a very slow rate to ensure that the water is collected and stored and released slowly. There's another, I'll call the large underwater swimming pool over towards the TD Bank that collects the water in that area, and once again meters it down slowly into the Ross Avenue stormwater system. And Costco have, under their parking lot, a series of very large diameter pipes that do a similar thing, so that we have demonstrated through our engineering consultants that when there is a sudden rainfall and the parking lots run off more quickly than, let's say, natural grass or woods, that the water is collected and released slowly at a lower rate than it released from the site prior to the development. So we don't have a flooding issue at all where we are, and we've done a lot to ensure that we don't contribute to the flooding system in our neighbors. Yeah.
So the new buildings will be connected into that system and there'll be no
yes.
problem. It's good for everyone to know that because we always have those questions from that area. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Councillor Hickey.
I just to echo the Deputy Mayor's point, I was wondering if there's any concern with the smaller developments off of Retail Drive in terms of runoff there. Will you have any concerns? Because I know that the residents in the area have had concerns in the past on runoff. I'm just wondering if building new buildings or if there's any risk for that to be impacted by runoff there.
There shouldn't be,
Okay.
because as I say, the amount of building area between the parking lot area and the roof area, which are the big concerns for stormwater, won't change significantly from the original stormwater studies that were done 10 to 12 years ago.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I just have some general comments, really no questions, Mr. Wheatley, for you, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and I'll call again and ask if there's anyone else wishing to speak in favor of these amendments. Okay, and I think that's it for that piece. So we'll have
Move first reading on the
municipal plan.
amendment.
Okay, moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan, excuse me, and Councillor Reardon. Question?
I have a question for staff.
Yep. Mr. Reed's coming back to the podium.
Okay, excellent. I know that there has been, or whatever, a traffic study done by the developer, but has that intersection been looked at through our transportation plan?
We're at the third stage of Move SJ where we're getting into some of the modeling and model development for those future years. So, that would be an opportune matter that we could take back to the consultant doing that study and just, do some scenarios in terms of, okay, if we have the 2 offset Ts, what happens if we realign it, and what happens at that location.
Okay. And the other question I had was with the new zone, whatever that is, regional, commercial, residential, or whatever, it sounds like there could be the potential to allow residential on the main floor.
Yes, that provision's in there that requires it to be on an upper level floor. Now, the way have the zone set up is that's a variable standard by PAC, so it's something that, should the developer do some additional market soundings and design and that, the demand be such that it, could be a wholly residential building, then they could come back to the committee for a variance, and then that would allow for a level of staff review and public comment as well.
Okay, because I would like for it to be fair, because you have that requirement in your business improvement area right now, and when Don Hazen a few years ago could not gets a tenant in there, a commercial tenant, and applied to council, we would not allow residential on the main floor. So if you want the uptown to flourish as well, it needs to be at least treated equally and fairly. So I guess that's my one concern about that designation. I'm happy if as long as it applies to
Yeah.
both areas.
And that was, that was a way, we looked at that at staff, and, it was a way to, meet the needs of the applicant and, meet that broader provision that we have in the other commercial zones where we have multiple unit in those commercial zones and the requirement for commercial on the ground floor.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I mostly just have comments for the most part, a couple of questions perhaps, but the main thing is, the traffic's going to be, well, an issue because it's already been an issue, but it's possibly the two worst intersections on the east side. Because they do get filled up, especially 4 to 6. So that's definitely a concern for me. And this is only going to be 200 units, is that?
Yes, the proposed Section 59 conditions would limit the residential component to 200 dwelling units.
All right. I would like to see that scrapped, to be honest. I'd like to see the 400. Maybe that would light a fire under us to actually fix some of these streets, some of these intersections, and get some of this stuff done. And, we can leverage the extra, tax dollars that we're getting from the extra 200 units. But for this new designation, was there any concern about it basically just being like a pavement and no trees? No grass, or because this just seems like a parking lot.
Your Worship, through you to the councillor, the existing Section 59 conditions, and these are conditions, portions of the agreement that we're recommending be retained. Those require development officer review of the site plans, and they are also subject to the landscaping provisions of the zoning bylaw for regional retail centers. There is quite a bit. When we did the new zoning bylaw, East Point was one of those areas that we held up as, one of the better examples of how parking lots were landscaped in recent years here in the city. If you look at, some of the areas out in front of Chapters and Indigo, and then the work that was done on the Costco site in particular with respect to the landscaped islands and the trees, it's really, this is a case where we've had the developer really raise the bar on that aspect. It really doesn't show up on the 50,000 foot site plans that we had up on the screen, but you really see it when you zoom in on those detailed site specific plans that come in with the building permit. So,
okay, I just I'd like to see some grass or something. A few trees here and there is one thing, but grass for children to play on or something like that is a whole different story. For especially if you're gonna have families in there or anything like that, like Councillor Reardon said, there's not really a park or anything around it. I just don't want it to be like a concrete jungle, basically. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reardon, you had a follow-up?
I was just going to ask, we got this evening. Is there anything different in this that's in my kit?
the only amendment was where it lists multiple unit dwelling as a permitted use. The one that went out in the packet had subject to a secondary clause of the zoning bylaw. I believe it was 11.2F, that it was a typo on our part that was since amended. So there's no real substantive change.
Okay.
It's just a
All right.
typo.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. On the first reading municipal plan amendment, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any, thank you. And, Clerk?
A law to amend the municipal plan bylaw.
Move second reading of the municipal plan amendment.
Thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Motion is carried.
A law to amend the municipal plan bylaw.
Move first reading of the rezoning.
Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. On the question, not seeing any mics. All those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Move second reading of the rezoning amendment.
Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thanks.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple of comments, I guess. I think very, very positive project. Would like to say thank you to the proponents. I think it's an innovative approach. Mr. Wheatley made some comments about staff and PAC and those that work through. I think it was very positive. There's a lot of opportunity here for having a walkable community. It's innovative. I think it's like you see in many other metro areas around. You know, for example, I'm very familiar with Halifax. Lots of economic benefit here, so I think it's a very positive night with a benefit of growing our tax base. It's, if you've been to East Point, in this one individual's opinion, it's a very high quality development. They haven't done anything at the low standard. Most things have been done at a very high standard. And then just on the traffic, I guess two comments. Number one, it's very relative. I was in Ottawa on the weekend, and it took me about an hour and 5 minutes to go 11 kilometers. So traffic can be a relative thing. And secondly, certainly the issue raised around solutions for Rossley Avenue remain a top priority. I mean, these are ongoing discussions to find solutions there as well. So anyway, thank you very much for the presentations tonight, everyone. Okay, thank you. Next item, Clerk.
Your Worship, 9.2 on the agenda is a proposed municipal plan amendment and rezoning for 1007 to 1019 Milledge Avenue. There is a Planning Advisory Committee report recommending approval, and there's also a staff report along with this.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Hamilton for an introduction to our short verbal and slide update. Thank you.
Your Worship and members of council, tonight is a public hearing to consider an application for a plan amendment and rezoning by Mr. Jordy Ring to allow for an expansion of a long-standing, non-conforming boatyard in the Milledgeville area. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ken Melanson, the Manager of Community Planning, to provide a brief overview of the file.
Okay, good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening to you and members of council. As Ms. Hamilton mentioned, this is an application that is a municipal plan amendment and a rezoning application. The existing boatyard is a long-standing non-conforming use in the Milledgeville community, but is seeking to expand the repair operations occurring on site through the construction of a new building for indoor repair activities. Because of restrictions in the Community Planning Act, a non-conforming use cannot expand or be allowed to build a new building, which has led to the need for this application, which is before you. Here's the subject site noted in blue, which contains the main boatyard and a lot being used for boat storage, which is owned by another landowner, which is why there's two landowners listed in the report. This lot will be eventually purchased and consolidated into the overall site, so a future subdivision will happen, which will create some lot boundary changes. The subject site also contains a dwelling unit, which you can see on the right-hand side, which is right about there. And the surrounding development is a mix of single dwellings, multi-dwellings, and of course the yacht club, which you can see up in the corner here. This is a rather unique use, which does need to be located adjacent to water. This area is prone to flooding. However, it is not located in any municipal or provincially designated flood area. This is not an area where any flood regulations apply. That being said, flooding issues were part of our review of this application. It's the site plan that was included in the application, which is on page 279 of the council package, and does show the proposed future subdivision plan, which will occur at a later date. And as I mentioned, we'll adjust some of the lot boundaries to incorporate the lot for purchase that I mentioned earlier, and that will be dealt with by staff. The proposed building is greater than 50 meters from the ordinary high water mark. Therefore, a WAWA permit should not be required. Here's an aerial close-up of the subject site. The second building, which you see here, has been demolished, so this building no longer exists. And this is the rough area approximately where the new building will be constructed. I should note that this site was subject to enforcement action for unsightly premises. However, that issue was not part of our review and is not relevant to council's consideration and decision-making tonight. We just note it as information in the report, as it was a concern that was raised through several inquiries that we received during the application process. Here is a close-up of the subject site. The second building that I mentioned that was torn down was generally just in behind here. So the future building will be located just in behind this area. So here is looking towards Manor Sutton. So here is, the mouse would work, here is the site roughly that is not owned by the applicant but will be purchased and consolidated and is being used for that purpose, and the multi-residential that I mentioned earlier. Here's the dwelling that currently is on the boatyard parcel, which at a later date through a subdivision will be carved off onto its own parcel. And then the multi-residential development, a close-up of that, as I mentioned, closer to the intersection of Manor Sutton. Subject site has two different designations in the municipal plan: parks and natural areas for the area adjacent to the watercourse, and then stable residential for the remaining. In order for this application to be processed, we will have to redesignate both areas to stable commercial to facilitate the boatyard activity, as that has to be facilitated across the entire parcel in order to enable the rezoning to occur. As you can see here, the site is zoned R1, which is residential one dwelling, and only allows for residential uses, so commercial uses are not allowed on the site at this time. The proposed rezoning would take the subject site to commercial corridor, as this is the only zone where the proposed use actually is listed. And I would note that this site is typical of a commercial corridor type use, although we are using it as in a standalone scenario. We have used the CC zone in standalone occasions where specific uses have warrant one-off approach. This type of use is very site-specific because of the need to be located close to water, so staff is supportive of this approach. In terms of conditions, given the unique flooding considerations of the site and that this use needs to be located in proximity to water, staff have taken the approach to lock down the uses on the site specifically and only to the boatyard use. This avoids the potential that other uses could occur on the site and responds to concerns for public safety. For example, residential uses would not be allowed to occur on this site should council approve the rezoning, which will respond to the concerns of flooding. Staff have also examined the levels of flooding on the site through our GIS system. We've been able to map the levels of water infiltration on the site in and around the proposed building over the past 2 years. The mapping has shown that the last two floods, the water depth is approximately 1.5 meters or less in and around the area where the building is proposed. In order to ensure the safety of chemical storage and electrical panels, a Section 59 condition has been proposed that all chemical storage and electrical panels be at least 2 meters above the floor of the proposed building. Once again, this responds to any concerns related to flooding and public safety. This is a similar approach to other cities which are prone to flooding, such as Calgary and Winnipeg, where they specify a minimum elevation for panels to avoid water infiltration. The applicant reached out to neighbors of the site on his own after having a formal pre-application with staff. This engagement is detailed on pages 271 to 275 of the council package and includes the letter provided to those neighbors, a map of residents contacted, and their signatures of support. The staff recommendation is shown here in two parts, and you can find that on pages 254 and 255 of the council package, which was essentially to redesignate the site in the municipal plan and then rezone the site and apply conditions. In terms of the application post PAC, I would note that since this was a municipal plan amendment, there was advertising that occurred for the 30-day comment period in February. No public comments were received, and our regular public engagement process through PAC was also engaged. Only the applicant and their solicitor came and spoke at PAC. However, a number of supporters were in the audience. No other members of the public came to speak at PAC. And, oh, that's weird. PAC's recommendation to council is that you adopt the staff recommendation as proposed. And PAC supported staff's approach for flood mitigation efforts with the specific conditions and is endorsing our recommendation. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll enter into the public hearing. It's already commenced for a plan amendment and rezoning of 1007 to 1019 Millage Avenue. And I'll ask if there's anyone wishing to oppose these amendments here with us tonight. Okay, I'll ask for the second time if there's anyone wishing to oppose these amendments tonight. Okay, and I'll ask for the third and final time if there's anyone wishing to oppose these amendments tonight. Not seeing any. Okay, thanks. I'll ask if there's anyone wishing to speak in favor of these amendments. Okay, come on up to the podium if you would and tell us your name for the record. And
good evening, Your Worship and Councillor. My name's Jody Ring. I'm the applicant in this proceeding. Just a little bit of family history. I'm the third generation on that location. My plans are to take our seasonal business to year-round. That's why we're looking for approval tonight to expand with the new building, to let us go year-round, and also to keep and employ more people in my staff, which is very hard in a seasonal business to keep everybody, on hand. Secondly, I know it is a new kind of we are prone to flooding, but in this process, we are a boatyard. We are no different than any other boatyard on the St. John River. As far as when you start at Rossay, Renforth, the RKOIC, Power Boat Club, St. John Marina, and further up the river, we're all the same thing. We're flooding, and hopefully someday that'll be fixed. But right for now, it is a boatyard. If anything floods, we can simply just float the boat and move it out. I do agree with all the recommendations through staff, and we approve, and we've sent letters in that recommendation.
okay, thank you, Mr. Ring. Any questions for Mr. Ring? Okay, we have Councillor Reardon.
I'm just curious, Mr. Ring, that with the flooding, though, in the kit, it mentions that you'll be using some toxic chemicals, and those will be stored up a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
But with flooding on your property, I guess my concern is that those chemicals end up on property as well, right? Because just of using them for whatever they're repaired for. So if you're built where you know you're going to be flooding and you can float your boat, what's happening to the chemicals that have been
Staff has recommended all of our chemicals be at least 2 meters off the floor. The amount of chemicals we'll be storing at times, because it has a shelf life, will be 20 liters of, boat resin is the most hazardous chemical there would be. Everything else we use water-based paints, chemicals that's all prone to be around the water anyways. So our boat resin is probably the most hazardous. Other than that would be it, probably.
So I guess what I'm asking, though, is if you were using boat resin and you spilt some of it,
Mm-hmm.
you're saying it has a short shelf life?
Yes.
So it's not toxic after so many days?
No, it goes hard.
Oh, it goes
It
hard.
goes hard, yes.
So we don't have to worry about it contaminating the
It
property
doesn't stay as
then
a
if it's
liquid
gonna
form.
What? Pardon?
It doesn't stay as a liquid form. It goes
Okay.
hard, yes.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reardon, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I think you're pretty used to flooding in that area, so I guess you'll know what to do if, because it is down close, and if we keep on having the flooding that we've had in the last couple of years, you may have some issues there, but I know I've been down there before, and you have everything packed around the house, and it all works, so
Yes.
I wish you all the best. I think
Thank
it's
you.
a great thing that you're doing there, so
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Councillor Hickey.
I'm certainly well acquainted with boatyards flooding. Are you prepared for the maintenance and taking on that in terms of the flooding if we see it on a more annual basis?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm, again, really excited to see the development. Glad you're
Thank you.
glad you're investing. That's awesome.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Worship. Jody, the, the new building that you're talking about, is it not somewhat waterproofed? Like, I mean, there's no windows down low or anything like where water could
No,
come in?
It's a steel structured building.
Right.
With insulation inside. We're still working on heights of elevations. If we can put the building up on a knee wall on the footing, then we will to keep it out of the water. But basically, it's a steel building. If the water comes in, it'll just come right back out again.
Right,
So
okay. But I mean, when you talk about damage inside, there's not going to be a whole lot that can get damaged if everything's 2 meters off the ground.
Yeah, no, basically everything inside would be, it's basically to house and keep the weather out so we can work on boats inside.
Right.
It's just basically a big warehouse.
Right, and is there a possibility of more staff being hired on because of this?
Oh, yes, yes.
Any idea how many?
Through the peak season, we could get up to as many as 10.
Really?
Yes, because
That's a
going
big
to be
increase.
our main focal point is the industrial side of fiberglassing.
Yeah.
Which there's a 3-year waiting list for any boats on the New Brunswick side that has to go to Nova Scotia to be worked on. So if we can pick away at that 2 a season, and we're rushed. There's a 2-month window in order for us to get that work done.
Right.
So that'll increase the staff. Throughout the rest of the winter, it'll be a little bit smaller, but it'll still be up there.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just following up on Councillor Mackenzie's comment about extra staff, you had also mentioned, I think, at PAC, something like 6 staff will also get an extra 4 or 5 months of work because
Yes.
of the ability to work through the winter. So,
Yes.
so there will certainly be more work there, more employment. Another thing you mentioned at PAC, this kind of follows up on Councillor Reardon's comments around chemicals. The majority of chemicals that you use aren't toxic.
Exactly. No, they're almost all water-based products. Because we are around water, we have to always be an invent to what's going on at the same time. And most storage of product of anything hazardous, we only buy as much as we need because of shelf life.
So other than very contrary to many, many years ago,
Yes.
the responsibility and the knowledge around the chemicals used, they're safe and you're used to that storing practice.
It's more and more green friendly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So thanks, Mr. Ring. So I think sort of positive and congratulations on three generations. You've answered my questions around the flooding component. I mean, obviously, you're going to, for your best interest, you're going to look at grade of your building and try to get it up as high as you can. I want to congratulate you. Not everybody does it on the way you reached out to the community. I've rarely seen an application with 100 signatures on it saying, "Look, we're in favor of." I think it speaks to the respect that folks have for you and your business, and I congratulate you because again, rarely do we see somebody who reaches out the way you did and who can garner 100 signatures. And then the last piece, I know it's not part of the consideration tonight. I just would ask you to continue to think about, and I don't know the legacy story, but the yard and cleaning up and old maybe some of those old owners, you can ask them to come back and get their boats.
yes.
So anything you can do. I know it's not part of our decision tonight, but I suspect you're walking around in your yard regularly and going, my gosh. So anything you can do there to pick away and get a few more out each year or whatever you're going to do with them, please do so.
Yes, I will do.
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay. So I think that was 2. I'll ask one more time if there's anyone else wishing to speak in favor. Maybe that was the second, and I'll ask one last time if there's anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this application. Okay, not seeing any. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. Thank you. Okay, and do we have any questions for staff? Not seeing any. Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Okay. Get a microphone. There you go, Common Clerk.
A law to amend the municipal plan bylaw.
Second reading.
Thanks. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. And I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you.
A law to amend the municipal plan bylaw.
Okay, zoning.
First reading on rezoning.
Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. And on the question, all those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Move second reading on zoning.
Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. And on the question, all those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Seeing anyone? Thank you. Motion is carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Okay, thank you for the staff presentation and for all the work. Okay, next item.
And Your Worship, the final public hearing tonight is 9.3 on the agenda. It's a proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 1003 Lattimore Lake Road. It does have a PAC report recommending approval, and there is a staff presentation.
Okay, we're going to have Ms. Hamilton introduce that and for an even shorter verbal update. Ms. Hamilton.
Your Worship and members of council, your third public hearing tonight is to consider a proposal to rezone 13 hectares of land located at 1003 Latimer Lake Road from rural to pit and quarry, and the application has been submitted by Hughes Surveys on behalf of Thomas Construction. Tonight we have Mr. Andrew Reed, who will be delivering a brief staff overview of the file.
Go ahead, Mr. Reed.
Thank you. The proposal requests that council rezone 13 hectares of land from rural to pit and quarry. And the proposal represents the expansion of an existing gravel pit located off Latimer Lake Road. And it would be located to the northeast of the existing gravel pit. Under the zoning bylaw, the property is currently zoned rural. And under the municipal plan, it's designated rural resource area. These lands are intended to facilitate resource-related activities, which include gravel pits. The proposal was evaluated and it meets all the municipal plan criteria for establishing a gravel pit, and that criteria is outlined in the staff report. The area requested to be rezoned, as I mentioned, is 13 hectares, and within that subject area, a portion of the Planning and Advisory Committee temporarily approved 1.5 hectare area has already begun to be excavated, with slopes around the perimeter maintained and a berm along the north. So that area has followed all the conditions and zoning bylaw requirements. The current rezoning proposal was preceded by a rezoning application in 2018, as pictured here. The newly proposed 13-hectare area was made on the basis of where good material was located in the site. So the new area is set back an appropriate distance from wetlands and residentially zoned property. The closest residentially zoned land would be 350 meters from the boundary. Section 2.10 of the zoning bylaw states that where an application has been received that seeks approval of a matter that has been denied within the immediately preceding 12 months, it will not be reconsidered unless the council, the committee, or the development officer, as the case may be, is of the opinion that it is substantially different from the previous application. In this case, as the rezoning is a council application, the decision rests with council on whether the proposal is substantially different. It is staff's view that the 2019 rezoning is substantially different. The previous proposal was 21 hectares and was located in a different location further away from Lattimore Lake Road. The current proposal is substantially less at 13 hectares. Public engagement was conducted for this application with letters sent out to landowners and the rezoning advertised on the city's website. At the Planning Advisory Committee meeting, there were no members of the public in attendance, and as well, we've received no letters with respect to the application. The staff recommendation to the committee was that council approve the rezoning, subject to a number of Section 59 conditions outlined here. The Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation was in full support of staff's recommendation, and in turn is recommending that council approve the amendment, approve the rezoning in Section 59 conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, this is the zoning bylaw amendment for 1003 Latimer Lake Road with Planning Advisory Committee report. We just heard a bit about that. I'll ask if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this amendment. I'll ask again if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the amendment. And I'll ask one final time if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the amendment. Okay, not seeing anyone. I'll ask if there's anyone wishing to speak in favor of the amendment. Okay, thanks. Come on up to the podium, and you look familiar, but we'll have you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of Common Council. Rick Turner with Hughes Surveys and Consultants here on behalf of Thomas Construction Limited. John Caldwell is also in attendance. He manages the extraction and processing activities on the site, and over a 2-year period took over all administrative duties upon his father's passing. We're in agreement with the staff recommendations and certainly respectfully request your support. We do have the positive staff report is positive on this. As stated, PAC recommendation was unanimously in favor of recommending approval, and the notices to the city, no objections written or otherwise. So the staff report's quite thorough, but there's some additional information that I'd like to provide at this time. It's information that I feel would have resulted in a different view of things in the 2018 rezoning request. So I'd like to put that forward. Some of this discussion will be about an area where there was an infraction, inappropriate excavation. For the most part, I'll be focusing on that. Mr. Caldwell, John Caldwell Sr.'s health started to deteriorate in 2015. It's something that I didn't impress on staff as we were going through dealing with issues in 2018. I had some knowledge of it, not the utmost detail. When we went to Planning Advisory Committee this past fall, the family gave me permission to just be very open about it. John Caldwell Sr. in 2015, early in 2015, was diagnosed with setting of Alzheimer's disease. John recalls when there was a letter come in 2015, John Sr. was saying, we've got to do some rehabilitation to get our permit and go out there and do it. We got to get things moving along here. So he was the one who looked after the operation, the physical operation, so he started some rehabilitation work. Eventually, there was rehabilitation took place in various spots within the proper pit. And there was a permit received in 2015 so that they knew that they could go ahead and proceed with excavation. In 2015, they applied for responded to a tender for supplying aggregate to the city of St. John. Their bid was successful, and they provided material throughout 2015, as they had years leading up to that, and for 2015 up to 2018. Each year they were granted parts of the city contract. Extracting from the area I'm saying was in question. They've done that in 2016, 17, and 18 as John Jr. took over the operations. He would go in each year. He knew he had to pay an $1,100 fee before he could start that year's extraction. Each year he paid that fee, provided material both to the city and the public and on contracts. As he took over these duties, he was also operating the physical operations of that and trying to look after his father over that 2-year period, 2015 to 2017. Over the course of this year, over the course of those years, there was nothing that came back from the city to alert him that there was a problem. It was something that he paid the fees and he carried on, not totally having a grasp on the requirements that his dad would have had. He thought he was in good shape. He did recall that in the early 2000s, the pits and quarries designation was granted Many pits were grandfathered in at that time. And this area is considered part of what they call the Slattery Pit from way back years ago. So as far as their operation, they thought, okay, good, we're grandfathered, we're fine to go. But it took years before they went back into this former extraction area. When the enforcement action started in 2018, it took some convincing Mr. Caldwell that there was a problem. The city wanted to meet on site. I talked to John. From what I could see, yes, there was a problem. Asked him to bring in paperwork. We met with the city. Once he gained a full understanding of the gravity of the situation, he immediately started some rehabilitation on the site as directed by staff. And he's worked pretty consistently with them from that time till now, just trying to get things put back in order. He immediately came to us to apply for rezoning for the area in question. And that was in 2018 for a much larger area. We've since shrunk that down quite a bit and as the staff have explained, moved it away from wetlands, moved away from homes. So for the rest of the construction season in 2018, the company was faced with purchasing aggregates from their competitors in order to just stay in business, try to keep their staff busy, try to keep the operation running. So while they're doing this, they're still paying permit fees and taxes, pit equipment setting idle, all those additional costs. And to say it was a difficult year for them would be an understatement. During the public hearing in 2018, a presentation was made to council. At the end of that presentation, there were no questions or concerns expressed. It seemed pretty simple. There was a staff recommendation, favorable. PAC was unanimous at that point, same as this time. No concerns by the public, and I had visited most of the homes along that area before that application. And the company was working diligently with staff to rectify some things. So at the public hearing, as the public hearing closed, what happened at that point in time was it went to questions from staff. And all of a sudden there were a lot of concerns and things expressed, which I can see from the staff report. If you go through it, you see a 3-year period there that, oh, there's an operator out there and he's a rogue operator, renegade. Well, I've given the explanation of how this is rolled out and given the background as best I can. In addition, I think the merits of a land use matter, such as what's before you tonight, it should be judged on the land use issues, which here, they match perfectly. They align with the municipal plan. In addition to that, the area is very remote to any kind of homes, anything like that. So it's what I would say one of your ideal locations for a pit. So I think with that, if there are any questions or concerns that I can further address, I'll do my best.
Okay.
Staff did a great presentation of what we're proposing and look forward to your support.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. I don't see any questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'll ask again if there's anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this amendment. And I'll ask one final time if there's anyone wishing to speak in favor of this amendment. Okay, not seeing any. Thanks. Any questions for staff, folks? Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded, sorry, it was somewhere down there. Oh, Councillor Armstrong, excuse me. Down there. Okay, thank you. Councillor Merrithew.
Questions for staff, please?
Okay, staff, thank you. Mr. Reid? Okay, off you go.
Mr. Reid, first of all, I didn't realize that PAC could give a temporary permit to excavate gravels and so on. How long is a temporary permit good for?
To you, Councillor, through your worship, it's typically valid for a period of 1 year.
Mhm.
And there are precedents of other excavations which we use to determine the suitability of that.
Very good. And can you answer me this, please, Mr. Reid? When applicant was denied last year on or about July 30th, okay, until that permit was issued about October something, when was the permit issued? October 2 I've got down here, is that correct? PAC issued the permit?
To the councillor, through your worship, I don't have the exact information on the permit dates.
Well then,
for the development
here's the
permit.
question. Was the applicant in compliant? Did he take aggregate out of that site between those two dates, when it was denied and between that and the temporary permit?
Through your worship of the councillor, I believe the history was after the public hearing had closed, excavation activity had ceased until the temporary approval was granted,
So
at
he
which
did-
point.
He did not take aggregate out of that site. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
All right. And he does have a restoration rehabilitation order to be complied with by July of this year? End of?
That's correct.
All right.
And we have seen evidence that that work has begun. As of today, there are a few photos of that, just where the majority of the work left to be done was hydroseeding, and the prohibiting factor there was just the onset of wetness and rain. in
Monsoon
the
season
spring.
that we were having, yeah.
Sloping and overburden has been done. We're just hoping to have that complete in June, and then the site will be fully rehabilitated.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, thank you. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you. Andy, policy LU 96 looks for an appropriate location, acceptable hours of operation. And it says here that the hours of operation, I love this word, are limited to 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Is that every day of the week?
To the council, through your worship, I believe it is, but I can
I just found that somewhat
confirm
excessive,
that.
I guess. But it's part of the policy.
Except on holidays, as defined in the Provincial Interpretation Act.
So that'd be like 10 days, maybe a year?
That is correct.
Sunday's not a holiday.
And that applies to all gravel pit.
Yeah, I realize
and
that.
quarry owners.
I realize that's part of that policy. Okay. All right, that's fine then. And the only other comment I'll make is that I am asked as a councillor to base my decisions on land use. And when I do that from this seat, I guess I try to look at what's best for St. John and what would work for St. John and surrounding citizens and for the applicant, so that there's some symbiotic relationship there. I just got a fairly extensive, health report and all sorts of things, history from Mr. Turner, which, is, I don't want to sound callous, but I have to really look at it from land use, and I think that's the most important thing. But it needs to be, for me, a balance for everyone, so that it's an industry that brings value to a neighborhood. It's a win-win for both sides. So that's where I'm sitting from this seat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so we have the first reading of zoning on the table. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Motion's carried. Common Clerk, your mic. There you go, sir.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Second reading.
Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. See no other questions. On the question, I'll call it. All those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Motion is carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you to all the presenters tonight. Thank you to staff for all the work, to PAC for all the work, to these. By the time these arrive to us, there's an extensive amount of work that goes into these. So thank you very much. So that has us to our delegation.
Yes.
Common
that's
Clerk?
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, Your Worship. Next item on the agenda is 8.1, and it's a presentation from the University of New Brunswick.
Okay, thank you. And we have a number of delegates here. Mr. Hashi, are you introducing or who?
I'll be starting.
Okay, thank you. We'll welcome you up to the podium.
So just do the, oh, it's on PDF. Gotcha. Okay.
You can go view full screen if you want, yeah. Ian, can we go view full screen there? And yeah.
Do it on PDF. Unless you've got somebody about half my age to do it.
Just go view, just go up to view, and then you should be able to go to full screen. There you go.
Still the arrow keys, I assume.
I assume so, yes.
Great.
So, Your Worship, members of council, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Larry Hashi, and I'm the chair of the Board of Governors of the University of New Brunswick. On behalf of myself, Dr. Eddie Campbell, and Dr. Petra Hauff, I would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to you this evening. The University of New Brunswick is deeply woven in the fabric of the province that surrounds us, and in many ways, we are the university for New Brunswick. Aside from being a major employer, 70% of all the research and development in the province of New Brunswick happens at the University of New Brunswick. So I'm going to try and move this PDF down or sideways if I can. Okay, nope, excuse me. Okay, well, we'll get there. We are here today to share with you some of the latest developments so we can continue our collaboration with the city. I also want to say that the work by our faculty and staff and students informs and builds communities, and especially around the Greater St. John area. We are an engine for economic growth and the social progress of our province. The campus that is located here is at the center of this activity in St. John and the surrounding areas. We're extremely proud of the role that we play and that we continue to play in the collective vision of our home. We're here today to share with you the latest developments so we can continue our collaboration at UNB. Now, we are transitioning between leaders. Dr. Eddie Campbell, who I'll introduce here in a moment, is quote-unquote graduating this June. June is a very special time at the campus, as Councillor McAlery, Deputy Mayor McAlery has pointed out. And Eddie will be leaving us at the end of June. And he has a well-deserved rest, and he'll be doing some research, but we will also be welcoming a former New Brunswicker, Dr. Paul Mazerol. Dr. Mazerol is currently the Vice Chancellor and Provost at Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia. He's been there for decades. He's overseen growth of that university from 4,000 to 44,000 students. So we're bringing in an innovator. We're bringing in somebody we're very helpful with. We're very sad to see Eddie go, but we're also very excited about our new president that'll be starting on July the 1st. I also want to mention that you'll be introduced tonight to Dr. Petra Hauff. And Dr. Petra Hauff has been appointed the Vice President of St. John as well. And someone that we're also very proud. She's a mover and a shaker, I'll tell you. There's lots of things happening at the campus, and she's the center of it all. So without further ado, and taking up much more mic time, I will present Dr. Campbell.
Thank you.
So thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Thank you very much for listening us to here this evening. As Larry indicated, I have 1 foot out the door. I'm very confident in where we are.
So yeah.
I see. So somehow, wait now. Okay, so these were the slides you were supposed to see.
Perfect.
Is what Larry was speaking to.
There you go.
And then he was speaking to me and my successor. Larry, you said former New Brunswicker. That doesn't work. You're a New Brunswicker.
You're always a New Brunswicker.
You can take the boy out of the province, but you can't take the province out of the boy. I want to speak to I have a set of slides to speak to here. Every year we survey our students, and it shows that some 40 to 50% of the students on both of our campuses are in fact first-generation students. Neither mother nor father went on to college or university. For us, this means we have a crowd of students who need extra financial help in order to afford to be with us. For that reason, we launched a fundraising campaign called It Begins Here, with the goal of raising $110 million. There were some 10,000 alumni all around the world which responded. and the majority of those, 5,200 of them, were in fact from New Brunswick. The response was phenomenal. There were corporations, philanthropic enterprises, alumni and friends. We not only met our target, we exceeded it by more than 15 million, with the total raised being just over $125 million, with some $62 million of that total being devoted to student support of one kind or another. We're very proud of that, and we believe it to be very important for the future of our university and indeed the communities that act as our hosts. We've also been successful in realizing some significant investments in infrastructure on our campuses, the most recent of which is the Hans W. Clone Commons building, a modern 21st century library replacing the Ward Chipman Library, about which more later. There's also, you have to say, we have a Mackay Residence. In recent years, we built the Dalhousie Medical Education Building that now houses that program. And as you are all probably aware, we co-located with the New Brunswick Community College on the campus here in St. John, as well as on the campus in Fredericton. And that's been very successful. That New Brunswick Community College building houses all of their allied health programming. And it really allows for us to speak to the development of something we refer to as the Tucker Park Collaborative, the hospital, the university, the college, and the Dalhousie Medical Education program. And those are great partners for us, along with the City of St. John. And I have to say, your support for us in the past has been critical. But as you are all probably aware, there's lots of transitions happening, particularly with respect to higher education. The university has to evolve along with the expectations and needs of our employers and indeed our students as they go out to make their way in the world. We are evolving our academic curriculum. One of the most significant developments in recent years is the incorporation of what we refer to as experiential education, which is code for work-study sorts of programs, career-related internships or cooperative opportunities or jobs, even summer jobs, in professional settings for our students, related to not necessarily their degree, but what they might wind up doing after they leave us. That's a big part of what we are trying to do, prepare our students for a competitive, knowledge-based economy in which it's not so much what you know today, but what you're able to learn as you move forward into the future, as the job you have now may change dramatically, and we need our students to be prepared for that. I now want to introduce Dr. Petra Hauff, who's been with us 3 months, newly appointed Vice President St. John. She comes to us as the former Dean of Science and Director of Nursing at St. FX University. She's also held the position of a Canada Research Chair in Psychology there. We're very proud and excited to have her here. Petra, the floor is yours.
Is this the right direction? Yep. Okay. Thank you for having me tonight. As you heard, my name is Petra Hauff. I'm the new Vice President, St. John at UMB. And I'm new to UMB, so and I'm not a former New Brunswicker either, as you can hear by my accent. But I'm a proud Canadian since 5 years. So I'm extremely excited about the future of our campus here in St. John and what it will mean to the city that I now call my home. A growth agenda for our campus means a growth agenda for the city. Increasing our student numbers and our faculty and staff population means economic growth for the city. And by working together, everyone wins. Several months ago, UMB has started again the set of a stage for a renewed strategic plan. And it's interesting for me, being new here, to see that what has remained consistent throughout the process is the commitment to our students and to our collaborations with industry partners, government, community organizations, and the City of St. John. New Brunswick is faced with urgent health and social challenges. You know this better than I. The problems presented by an aging population, chronic illness, low literacy levels, and pockets of high poverty take an enormous toll on our provincial and regional economy and prevent many New Brunswickers from enjoying healthy lives and from living to their full potentials. we're thinking about health. The UNB is already a leading contributor to improving the health of New Brunswickers, as we educate students in health professions and health-related fields to enhance the health and well-being of our population. Navicare is, for example, one initiative that UNB St. John is hosting, where we're looking into facilitate a more convenient and integrated care to support physical, mental, emotional, social, cultural, and spiritual needs of children and youth with complex health needs and their families, focusing on this family-centered approach. One point you go to, and they help you to navigate the healthcare system to get the best service for your children. The Health and Social Innovation Center is on the St. John campus is an important part of a solution to New Brunswick's most pressing societal issue, the looming healthcare situation. The state-of-the-art structure that we are aiming for will serve as a provincial hub to support and facilitate innovative and effective health initiatives that are priority not only to UNB but also to the province. It will provide much-needed space for a cluster of health and social innovation, research collaboration, and teaching activities. It will be the home of new academic programs that will prepare New Brunswick's next generation of health professionals. And our St. John campus is the ideal location for such an infrastructure building. It is located together with the heart of the cluster of the health-related resources at Tucker Park, as mentioned already, Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick, Horizon Health Network, the St. John Regional Hospital, and the New Brunswick Community College. It will be a strategic investment in an infrastructure that supports health, innovation, research, and education, which will offer young New Brunswickers the opportunity to play a leadership role in New Brunswick in developing a health innovation hub that enhances not only our knowledge, but also directly impacts the health and well-being of our people while generating jobs, wealth, and social prosperity. The building will provide essential support for the emerging health cluster and the research activities and academic programming in St. John for the St. John future. The infrastructure project itself, as whenever you are starting building, will also provide immediate economic stimulus to the New Brunswick design and construction industry. The project will be delivered through a construction management approach with a total project cost of $36 million. It is estimated that the project will generate already a total of around 300 direct and 90 indirect jobs throughout the construction process. There are concrete economic deliverables, enhance health of citizens, will directly impact productivity and participation in the economy, and help manage the costs associated with our aging population. Will strengthen the provincial workforce, expand our capacity for innovation, and of course will attract investments from the private sector and foster agility in the public sector and across the economy. The health growth vision for St. John campus is not only a building. The building is the infrastructure. It is the shell that gives us the opportunity to create those health research clusters for research that houses new programs, that creates a space where people are together and build teams and innovate and create new ideas that we really need to move forward. We will not solve the health issues or the health problems that we are looking at by looking back and do it a little bit different than we did it the last 10 years. We need really major changes, and we need to create an environment where we get the people together out of the community, out of the academic environment to really work on this together. And we want to create this hub at the St. John campus. The health vision has been approved, has been endorsed by the Board of Governors, but I wanted to be here today to bring this to you in person. Having just started here in St. John, this is a very exciting project for me, and I can't wait to get it started. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. That's it. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, you're up first.
I just want to thank everybody that's involved, but when are you thinking about building the building? When you have to raise that $36 million first? Or did you come to us for the $36 million?
Dr. Campbell, that'd be an awfully nice legacy if you could announce that. Would you like to announce it tonight?
We need to raise the money.
Yeah.
And we are engaged in raising the money. We have first order of business, get people all excited about the potential and it's impossible not to notice that there may be some elections in the offing.
Yeah.
Things like that. This is I hasten to add, in the $125 million that I referred to, no public money in that total. That was all privately raised. We will be looking to ourselves. We will be looking for donors. We're looking for support from our provincial and federal governments to help build this building for the reasons that Petra outlined. So stay tuned.
Okay, well,
We may even see
congratulations.
support from
We'll
this
look
council.
forward to it.
Please.
Would you be surprised?
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you. And as a former student of UNB and UNB St. John in particular, I'm particularly excited to see this development proposed. I like the quote that a growth agenda for the university means a growth agenda for the city. I think it really helps us work to build the 21st century post-secondary school that we want to have, and I think we're certainly starting to get there. And whether it's in terms of the cutting-edge teaching, cutting-edge technology, making it more competitive, and things like that in terms of attracting students to the city and retaining students from the city to continue to study in the city. Not a question, but certainly in seeing the significant growth in international students in the community, I want to stress that it's certainly of my opinion that just one matter in particular. I know we've seen in the media recently around UNB professors, specifically Dr. Ricardo Duchesne, espousing things like hate speech and things like that in his class, consistently quoted on things, saying things like influx of Asian immigrants is threatening the Canadians' European character. I just hope that UNB takes these accusations seriously and is addressing them seriously. I certainly respect the processes that you need to follow in terms of addressing that, but I think that certainly contributes to attracting those students and building a cutting edge school, and really, influencing to the point of that UNB is more than just its buildings. It's about what's going on within them as well. So I hope that I understand that it's certainly being taken seriously by the school, and I certainly wanted to bring it up.
Well, thank you for your comments, Councillor and alumnus. I can't speak to Professor Duchesne. We have processes that we are following, but those are necessarily confidential in nature, at least for the time being. I do want to say it was a year ago, December, that I went to the campus in my State of the University address that I give annually. I suggested that we try to grow the campus here in St. John from 2,000 students to 4,000 students. And that to do so, we would need to focus on new health-related programming, such as Petra was just describing, as well as the big three attractors for international students are engineering, computer science, and business. The university, as it says on the slide we have up there now, is engaged in an extensive strategic planning process where those numbers, so I'm giving those numbers, the university doesn't own them until we go through that process, and they're debated and adopted or changed as people believe necessary, as we do our homework and our research around where those students would come from. But I think it should be clear to everybody in this room that those students are not going to be students from New Brunswick. We have no intention of trying to bleed students away from the other institutions or the campus in Fredericton. We want those students to come from outside, in fact, Atlantic Canada, because the demographic challenges that Petra was referring to challenge all four provinces in this part of our confederation. So indeed, we're looking to the rest of Canada and around the world to attract students here. We believe through the strategic planning process we'll come up with the right program mix that will be attractive to students in the rest of Canada and around the world, and that we will get to some significant increase, a big step change in the size of the campus here. And I do think that carries with it very significant economic benefits for the city, but not just simply in terms of the growth of numbers and the potential new immigrants that will arise, but also because of the kind of syntheses and synergies that we will see operate. I see we have Shelley Reinhardt, well known to you all here. She's the director of our program, our MBA program, one-year program, think there's 72 students in it this year, Shelley, and most of them are international. We plan to move that program to the Scotiabank building up here in King Square. We plan to significantly grow its enrollment. It's going to be housed in the top 2 or 3 floors of that, and currently the plans are for Enterprise St. John to house an incubator in the bottom floor. And we have great hopes that the interaction between the entrepreneurs on the first floor and the new MBA students up on the second and third floors will produce some really interesting collaborations that, well, we can't say what they are today, but I really believe that's going to have a really big impact in bring new energy and new enthusiasm and new businesses to the uptown area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No, that's really exciting to hear. I'm thrilled to see that attitude come on from the university, and it certainly shows a lot of growth in the dynamics of our community.
Yeah, you'll want to invite President Mazeral here and say, make sure he knows what his instruction set is from the guy who left.
Perfect. That's how it works, sure. Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. Dr. Campbell, I just wanted to say thank you for coming tonight with your team. I had 2 students graduate from UMB, one from engineering, one from business, 2 of my 4. We have a scholarship fund up there with you, and I get so many lovely invitations to all kinds of events that you're doing, but I just wanted to let you know I'm so busy with this council gig, I just can't get up there. But thanks for coming down, and congratulations on your retirement.
Well, thank you very much for your support in the form of those youngsters coming our way. Keep them coming.
I'm done.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. President, I have 3 up-and-comers, so I'll send them your way. So, as a former alumnus, and thanks for mentioning Dr. Shelley Reinhardt. She's no stranger and a former deputy mayor here in St. John. So it was great to have a UMB SJ, UMB voice on council, and I know she's a champion of that cause. So no questions, just really commentary. But as Tucker Park grows, so don't we. And I know we look forward to that partnership and anything that we can do to help support that. I know you've got a cast of players that are thumbs up for that initiative. And also the growth agenda that we have going on. I think UMBSJ has done a great job at attracting and retaining newcomers, and I look forward to doing that with you. And I know there's lots of positive voices around this table and at UMBSJ, so we're going to continue to attract and retain newcomers so that they call New Brunswick home, and welcome to our latest New Brunswicker. So it's great to have you, Dr. Hoff, in the house. So and with that, I hope that New Brunswickers, St. Johners, Frederictonians, no matter where they live, that they start to select UMB as their New Brunswick choice for university. So it's great, and I'll make sure I'll send 3 your way. So I better start saving. So there we go. Thank you, Mr. President.
The line that Petra and I use is, we're not from New Brunswick, we got here as soon as we could.
Awesome. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. So, Dr. Campbell, thank you to all the presenters. Heard when you go last to build on, but I think what I wanted to say was a couple things. Thank you to the entire team. I think I saw David Emerson.
David Emerson's out there.
So David's outside.
We get a grade from him afterwards.
Okay, I just wanted, there's David. I just wanted to give, David a shout out as well, because David does an excellent job of.
One in here, David.
Of just staying connected and coming and knocking on the door to not only represent UMB, but also to reach in to understand what the city's growth plans are and to see how we can synergize. And so I just wanted to say that. Also wanted to thank the board of governors led by your chair, Larry Hashi, the leadership at UMB, the faculty, the students. For their contributions, because they're really seeing a difference in and it's incredibly impressive that not only, again, faculty and students, but they're actually studying, but also getting ingrained into the community. And I just say, I have some UMB examples. I also have some Del Med examples where, they came to do an interview with me last week, as Dr. Hoff said, to get at, poverty and to really start. So not only are they studying, but they're also trying to pull this apart and figure out how can they, and it's pretty inspirational when you have, that whole broad team that I spoke about. And then lastly, just to pick up on what Councillor Norton and others spoke to, I think we have to ensure that you are integrated in our growth plans. It's tax base and it's jobs, but most importantly for New Brunswick, it's population. And here we have not only students from UMB, but all over the country, but the international students, and we need them to stay with us. So we need to make sure that maybe through David as the liaison and others that we and we know how we can help each other and support in those growth plans and initiatives, and make sure that we're connected at the hip, because again, as others have said, your success is our success. And I love Dr. Huff's comments on, I wrote down outcomes focused, but we have to evolve. Had an opportunity to take in the former president on Friday night, and it was what he spent a significant amount of time on is how is the education system evolving quickly enough to teach the next generation of students in a very different way than they had been previously taught. And then back to you, Dr. Campbell, on your graduation. I just looked up quickly. I think it's been 10 years.
Slow learner.
I was not going to say that, but wish you all the best on your graduation. And I did have an opportunity to meet the new president with the board chair, and a few of us had an opportunity to meet. And he'll, I'm sure, take the baton and keep running down the track. So thank you very much.
There you go. Well, thank you very much. Let me make a special plea for you to reach out to members of your community and try to ensure that as we are able to expand our experiential education offerings, that the business community is fully aware of the potential to hire students while they're still students, get a look at them, evaluate them as potential employees when they graduate. And I'm fully aware our local businesses have a strong tendency to want to hire local people. They want to hire New Brunswickers. And my rule for them is for every 2 New Brunswickers you hire 1 international student. You want the international students to feel valued, part of the mix. And if we have businesses, particularly those who are thinking about export, you've got lots of students who come to us from China, for example. It's the largest market in the world. A huge opportunity to employ those students to help grow your business. And we could use some help in that regard. I think that's a many-pronged approach. The university can only do so much. We need our community around us helping out. Sure. So we wanted to come here. The purpose in coming here tonight is just to tell you what our plans are. We think they're nicely aligned with the growth plans that you have, and keep the lines of communication open and let you know what we're up to, and hopefully we can find some really interesting ways to work together.
Wonderful.
Thank you all so much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay. Can I have a receive and file, please, folks? Okay, moved by the deputy, second by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Anyone contrary-minded? Okay, thank you. Okay, next item, Comm Clerk.
Your Worship, next item is 12.1 on the agenda, and it's a continuous improvement initiative, greening our fleet policy.
Okay, Mr. Fudge, are you introducing that? Okay, can you just hit your button for me? Thank you. Commissioner, I'm sorry. There you go, Commissioner Fudge, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Pleased to introduce our fleet manager, Kevin Lockery, this evening. He's going to present and recommend a new fleet policy called Greening Our Fleet. This policy was reviewed by your Finance Committee last week and received unanimous approval. The objective of the policy is to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions and fuel consumption through the responsible use of the city's fleet. And the policy supports the strategies and actions within the City of St. John Climate Action Plan to be carbon neutral by 2040. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kevin Lockery.
Good evening, Your Worship and Councillors. As Commissioner Fogan, or as Commissioner, not yet, Commissioner Fudge mentioned, the purpose of today's presentation is just to do a high-level review of our fleet, review our greening policy, and to also provide some marketing samples and policy rollout potential. Fleet Services currently supports 1,056 pieces of equipment. Of those 1,056 pieces of equipment, 304 are considered rolling stock, licensed rolling stock. The following chart provides an overview of the fleet class by code. These units break down into the following categories: general sedans, heavy equipment, which would be loaders, excavators, backhoes, heavy trucks, which would be tandems, 6 yards, garbage trucks, etc., light equipment, forklifts, ATVs, light trucks, 1.5 tons and under, St. John Fire Department heavy trucks, which would be pumpers, ladders, tankers, St. John Fire Department light trucks, which would be 1.5 ton trucks and under, St. John Fire Department sedans, St. John Police Force light duty trucks, which would be patrol vans, ident vans, and things like that, and St. John Police Force patrol sedans, which would be their cars. The remaining 756 pieces of small equipment make up the attachments for licensed rolling stock, including plows, wings, salters, blowers, etc., but it also includes backup pumps, generators, leaf blowers, lawnmowers, and things like that. Common Council had previously approved a new fleet policy in January of 2007, which focused on 6 key areas. One of those areas was to incorporate environmental initiatives into its vehicle and equipment asset-related daily activities to benefit the community, municipality, and the environment. One such of these new initiatives is our Greening Our Fleet policy. On the screen right now is the policy statement, which we're hoping that will be approved. I'll let you read it. It's also in your council packet. This policy applies to our entire fleet of vehicles, but it also applies to all of our motorized equipment in use by the city, whether owned or rented, leased, for use by city employees in the performance of their duties. Important to note, this takes everything into account, from the small engine right up to our tandems and things like that. To ensure a consistent approach to the Greening Our Fleet policy, all employees operating a city vehicle or motorized equipment must adhere to the following limitations. Vehicles and motorized equipment shall never be left idling when unattended. Engine warm-up periods will not exceed 3 minutes, provided the air brake pressure and or other critical settings have been reached. And vehicles and motorized equipment will be shut off whenever idling is expected to exceed 3 minutes. Employees are also encouraged to take the most direct, safe route to their destination, and vehicles are not to be utilized for long hauling. Just an example of long hauling. This is an example that Uber uses when explaining to their drivers. So basically, instead of going the blue route, which is the fastest route and most economical route through, to avoid the green route, which takes you outside of the point A to point B routing. As with all policies, there will be some situations or conditions which are not conducive to the implementation of the above limitations. The following exceptions to this policy have been identified and exist under the following circumstances. As you can see on screen, basically what we did is we met with and had lots of different conversations with municipalities all across Canada and tried to take their best practices. And we also met with the operations managers for both TES and water and tried to lay out those limitations, and that's what you're seeing on the screen now. This policy will be reviewed every 3 years and as determined by the city manager. As you see on the screen, periodic audits, as often as required of vehicles, motorized equipment use, will be performed by both fleet services and by the service area supervisory or management staff. This can be done, you'll notice in the bottom right of your screen, there's a little dashboard and things like that. In all of our equipment, we've currently installed AVL. The AVL allows us to monitor a variety of different diagnostics with regards to the vehicles. It can be idling time. It can be the routes they take, if there's engine faults, how fast they turn a corner, how quickly they stop, how quickly they accelerate. So the equipment itself gives us quite a bit of data. In addition to the periodic audits, we'll also provide essential support this policy will also provide essential support for forward-looking leadership with regards to this strategy and responsible community-centered fleet management practices for the 21st century. I've provided a glossary here on the screen. I just wanted to include it in your packet, just if you had any questions with regards to some of the terminology I've used. So when you look at the roles and responsibilities, Fleet Services will be responsible for the administration of the greening policy, and it shall be the direct responsibility of the operations manager of Fleet Services. Service areas will be responsible for the day-to-day the administration of the policy, and it shall rest with the supervisory and management staff of all departments which operate vehicles and motorized equipment in the course of delivering their services to the public and in support of other frontline services. Employees will serve as asset stewards and shall adhere to the applicable laws, regulations, as well as the fleet management and safety policies of the city, including the requirements of the Greening Our Fleet policy doc. Human Resources will assist with the integration of the Greening Our Fleet policy into the orientation of all new permanent and temporary employees, assist with the communication of our Greening Our Fleet policy in general through the 522 management system, as well as our other on-the-job training and career field training programs, and establish corporate networks including SharePoint and Info Center. Just as part of that rollout, the logo that you're seeing there on screen is one that's used by the Department of Energy in the United States. We'd be looking to develop something similar like this to have a consistent message when rolling it out to staff. Some of the other samples that we've pulled from the Department of Energy. The first image is obviously, well, it's not obviously, it's a poster that you can have different key points with regards to idling. And what some of the common misconceptions are, or with that being said, some of the truths that come with regards to the policy itself. The center image is the idea of having stickers placed in all of our vehicles. So those could be on the window or in front of the driver, just as a quick reminder when they're in the vehicle to turn it off, or the reminder of the policy itself. And then the third is the idea of getting a keychain that's another reminder as they're turning on that vehicle or when they're looking at the ignition, just to make them think green with regards to the operation of our vehicles. So this recommendation is still the same as what we had for the Finance Committee. It's in this case, we'd be looking for approval of the policy statement from Common Council. And if you have any questions or concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you.
Okay, thanks. Moved by the deputy, second by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. And questions? Councillor Merrithew.
Thank you, Worship. Not so much a question, but just a huge thank you to staff. Kevin, great presentation. Look, this is besides the money savings, okay, this is just a clean, responsible policy, and I'm sure staff's going to embrace this very much. Again, I can see in my mind's eye the students from St. John High down front with their placards and
Climate action. Yeah.
Pardon me?
Climate action. Yeah.
Climate action. Yeah, with their placards and letting everyone know that this planet needs a little help, and I think the City of St. John is doing just a little of that tonight. So sincerely, massive thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickey.
Just echoing Councillor Merithew's comments, I think this is a great initiative. Thanks to staff and everyone for taking the initiative on this. It certainly puts that climate action policy that we put in place. This is it in action, and that's great to see. Just one question. I know policing's included in this. Does this? I know, and usually the cars are left idling. Whether they're monitoring speeds or anything like that. Is there any consideration for response time in there, or will that have any effect? I know part of the exemptions are cars left unattended, so I'm not sure that will actually impact it at all.
Through you, Your Worship. So this policy itself is just for city vehicles. The Police Commission would look after their own vehicles. What we would do is, with your approval, we'd make that recommendation to the Police Commission if that's something that they would so do. Also, within the policy itself, it does deal with emergency vehicles and their utilization to ensure that response times and all of that are not affected.
Great. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is very good. A little pointless for the most part, but if we can get the province and the city planning department and especially the public on board, then it would actually mean something. But I guess the city's doing their part. It's something. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Worship. I go back to what our mayor had said, that you can have policies that declare urgency, or you can have actions. And for me, I agree with him that that this is one of those things that is actionable. And so, Mr. Lockery, thank you for taking a policy and so quickly putting it into action. So it's these changes in behavior that can have larger consequences. And when we all start to push this out beyond our own city fleet, but whether it's in the parking garage or whether it's it's at the camp or it's on a road trip or those sorts of things, it can have a compound effect. So thanks for moving it beyond a policy and putting it into practice. So hats off.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. This is a leadership issue for me. I know I can't change the world with vehicles, but I can change the city vehicles. And the environmental footprint, with all the environmental consequences, the carbon footprint, et cetera, that's the big win for me. The bonus is that we'll save some money, but I think it's great. I think, Kevin, you've done a great job. You usually always do a great job with these reports. So I'm really happy to see it and want to thank you very much and the team. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I'll echo Councillor Reardon. I think it is a leadership thing. I think that the city is in a position where, we need to show that this climate change is real, and that not only, does this help the climate, but it saves money, And I think that when people start to realize this, for those people that don't know now and they start to see these signals, they may start saying, yeah, I think I'll start saving some money too. I said it the last time, Kevin, I've seen people actually turn off their motor while they're in the Tim Hortons lineup now. They know it's that time of day where they're going to be there for a few minutes, they shut it off. And I think that's a good thing, and I think that the city is in a leadership role, and hopefully the provincial vehicles, school buses and that sort of thing will kick in later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Strobridge.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to staff. Do we have periods of time where our employees would be sitting in one of these vehicles for longer than 3 minutes? Or are we just talking about if you're running to get lunch, turn the vehicle off? Because I'm looking at this and I'm seeing the exceptions are below -10 or above 27 degrees Celsius. I don't know about you, but sitting in a car at even 20 degrees in July with no air conditioning on for any longer than a few minutes, you're going to be having a heat stroke. So my question is, if we're going to put our employees in a vehicle and it's a hot, sunny day, and if they're going to be in there for longer than 3 minutes and they got to wait till 27 degrees, I mean, I don't know how many days in St. John ever reach 27 degrees anyway. I would fear for their safety and for their health because they are going to overheat. So do we have incidents where these employees are going to be sitting in these cars for longer than 3 minutes?
Through you, Your Worship. So the intent of the policy with regards to both the upper and lower limits with regards to temperature is not to, I guess, it's to ensure that if you have people at a work site, be either in the winter or in the summer, and what we're saying is they don't have to turn those cars off in the circumstances where the temperatures have reached those degrees. So if you're in the winter and you have somebody working at a job site doing a dig of a hole or something to that effect, we want to have a safe space for them to go to if it's too cold. So what we're saying is if it's -10 degrees, or colder, and they're on our work site, we want them to have some type of warming zone. So the exception would be is that a vehicle on that site could continue to idle, or the same as with regard to with regards to heat. So if it is hotter than 27 degrees Celsius in the summer and people are working out around King Square or whatever it is, we want it to make sure that there's still a zone for them to go to. So we permit cars to idle longer than 3 minutes.
City Manager?
Your Worship,
Sorry,
to the
let me get you a mic here. Apologize. There you go, sir.
Your Worship, to the councillor, I take your point. You know, -5 is still cold and plus 24 is still hot. We're going to apply a degree of common sense to this, you know, and it's as much an education process as anything else. So, for example, if it's 20 degrees out, roll down the windows and try to do it through air as opposed to air conditioning. But clearly, if there are circumstances that arise where workers, employee safety is a concern, managers, by all means, and workers will be empowered to do what is right in common sense and turn on the air or turn on the heat. We're not going to be that draconian in the application of this.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, because those numbers, you know, 27 degrees, you're going to start having a heat stroke sitting in a car long before you ever get to 27.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So thanks, Mr. Lockery. A couple of first of all, and perhaps we discussed it in finance. Did we have a rough? I mean, I know very difficult because we haven't done it yet. But do we have a rough savings idea here on what you may anticipate?
To your worship, the sustainability group has an approximate savings of about $100,000 a year through this initiative.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And just a couple of quick hitters here, and I say sort of respectfully to Councillor Casey's. I'm sure if he meant pointless, he certainly said pointless. I wouldn't. I mean, this isn't a pointless exercise. I mean, there's the climate impacts, there's the hard cost savings impacts, and then it's just behavioral. I was sharing in finance. I had a bad habit in one of my vehicles. I just, for whatever reason, when I was waiting, I must have been waiting a lot. I just sat there. And it was probably a little out of comfort or whatever. I liked the radio and just let the car run. And one day I was going through my dash and it had an indicator of how many hours were on the engine. And then I was trying to do the quick math of how many kilometers I had driven and basically how much I just sat on the side of the road and just let the car idle. So bad for my pocketbook, bad for the environment. And then I came from the construction industry, and we had to work on this because folks would get to a job site, jump out of their truck, and work all day long and let the truck idle all day long on the job site. It's just an example. I'm sure it doesn't happen in the city. But if it were to happen, those are big savings. Those are big changes in behavior, right? So we didn't have this policy yesterday. Hopefully in a few minutes here we're going to have it. I think it's very positive. It does matter. And you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of actions: climate adaptation, climate mitigation, Play SJ, Move SJ, our growth plans. They all fit together. And every nickel we can save should be saved. And then lastly, I guess I would like to see us take this past motion, and I would like to see us, we have no ability to apply it, but I would like us to challenge the private sector, the business community and residents to adopt a no idling policy in the city of St. John. So how can you so I'm not sure how much those little keychains cost, but what can you do as a resident and what can you do as a business in the city of St. John to be part of our climate change adaptation and mitigation plan? So I would ask staff to think about. I hope media will report that we're asking the greater community to also adopt a no idling policy for themselves and for their businesses as well. So thank you very much for the work on this policy. Okay, well, thank you. The item is on the floor. I see no other microphones, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Okay, Common Clerk, next item.
12.2 on the agenda, Your Worship, is staff report St. John Major Junior Hockey Club agreement.
Okay, and
I would move the recommendation, but at the same time, I would move 17.1 up. With this 17.1 is the same as 12.
Same item. Okay, thank you. You've moved it. Do you have a seconder?
I'll second.
Second, Councillor Armstrong, and I think Commissioner, were you going to introduce the item? No. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Deputy. Do you?
Oh, I just want to make a comment. I'm very happy to see this happen, that we now have a 5-year agreement with the Sea Dogs going forward, and in the next couple of years, or we'll probably have a chance to get the Memorial Cup here in St. John. And if we watched the news coverage in Halifax a couple weekends ago, or a weekend ago, it was fabulous. They had thousands of people visit the city, and the hockey team here in St. John doesn't just do something for Harbour Station. It certainly does a lot for Harbour Station, but it also supports the business community and the restaurants and the bars, and it just gives people an additional reason to want to live in St. John because it's another activity. So I commend those that worked on the Harbour Station Commission and the Sea Dogs.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Councillor Casey. Your mic. Oh, excuse me, my mic. I need a mic. Councillor Casey, 1 second, sorry. There, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't support this. I like the 5-year lease, the license with the St. John Sea Dogs. I just can't go along with the extra money from the Growth Reserve Fund. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the background of everything we do, we remember that we've got a 2021 fiscal cliff of $3 to $11 million that we continue to work on. One of the successes of this council over the past few years, in my opinion, has been the work that we've done on the fiscal pillar of our priorities with regards to financial policies and rigor and strategy. I mentioned earlier, I attended a meeting on last Thursday night with arena groups where in rough numbers, to remind council, we run a deficit of about $900,000 a year on our arenas. 37% of which is attributable to users from outside of the city of St. John. And one of the concepts that we'll be hearing at a subsequent meeting that was talked about Thursday night was introduction of some form of user fee if we can't get the regional strategy around the use of our rinks and the funding of deficits. And many of those arena users are concerned about youth and adults ceasing to take part in ice sports. I have difficulty, given all those things, reconciling in my own mind that because of financial situation we're in and trying to become a more regional area, that some people might be dropping out of hockey or figure skating or speed skating or ice sports while we approve 5-year funding over $100,000 to a for-profit sports team. Other concerns I have with this from a policy perspective is the precedent it opens. Last week we turned down Forest Hill School on an exchange because our community funds were exhausted. A meeting later, we may find $100,000 plus for the St. John Sea Dogs. What happens in 2 weeks' time? How do we say no to the St. John Riptide or the St. John Alpines? I think it's no secret around this table where my heart is, if we had $100,000 that we thought would go to invest somewhere, I would love to see us maybe talk about Cherrybrook Zoo, as opposed to perhaps the hockey team. There were, in the last 3 years, I've listened a lot, and I try to learn from my teammates around council. I know I've heard conversations about concerns in the past about past councils passing motions that bind future councils to payments, because as a new council comes in a year's time, they may have a different direction. And certainly, many folks around this table, when they came on, I know, because of their direction, had canceled commitments made by a previous council, which is certainly a council's prerogative. Yet here we are contemplating an agreement where, not just in our term, but in the next council's term, we are making commitments on their behalf. This conversation started, I think, I received a call from the general manager of the St. John Sea Dogs. Now, being on the Harbour Station Commission, I chose not to engage in that conversation because there were other official conversations going on. And I am a little concerned about perhaps how this ended up on our plate from the get-go. Where Harbour Station is responsible for the tenants of Harbour Station. Again, and they are a regional facility with regional representation. The region funds deficits. For the City of St. John to take this on, I think sets a concern in my mind for precedence for folks who work with our ABCs, and perhaps sets a precedent that allows folks who would the normal process would be to go through our ABCs to now circumvent the ABCs to come directly to council. You know, one example that came to mind when I was thinking about all of this is, a few years back when the St. John Transit Commission changed policy with regards to the pricing strategy for those who are visually impaired. I mean, certainly that was a tough issue for the St. John Transit Commission, but I don't think that bypassed the Transit Commission to end up directly being dealt with by council. I think that stayed with the St. John Transit Commission. Yeah, I guess for my first go around, really on a policy level, from many different angles, I can't support this motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. I'll definitely be supporting this. When you're in a city that has the issues that we have, and we're trying to grow our population, you can't start turning off the amenities that are attracting people. We have thousands of people that come into this city to watch these games. The return on the investment that we have, I mean, it's critical. There's hotels, bars, grocery stores. Everybody benefits by having people drawn into the city for these events. The other side of this coin is, if we don't have a major tenant in that building, the deficit goes way up. And the taxpayers of this city are going to pay that deficit. So if that's your rather, then fine, but it's not my rather. I want to pay as little of deficit as possible, and I think by having a major tenant in there that draws people into the city, it's good for the city, it's good for our economy, our businesses, and it'll attract people that want to retire here. That's why our uptown's growing. There's so many things to do. People want to move in uptown and then attend these hockey games and stuff like that. So, I mean, in the big picture, it's a very small amount of money. I know that you can't do everything for everybody, but this is one of those things that has a big return on investment. And the downside is, if they leave, we've got a deficit that we're going to have to pay instead of having them offset that. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's, I think since this has come out, there's really, there's no middle of the road on this debate. Folks are either very for or they're very against. I've found that this debate is very much like attending a Sea Dogs game. You're either for the Sea Dogs or you're not. And with that, you know, I would say most of the people, especially in this room, we're all big Sea Dogs fans. But there's also some assumptions that have been cast about tonight too. And one of the reasons why we've had assumptions is because there's a lack of transparency with this one as well. We've had assumptions that we're going to be left with a deficit, which is making an assumption that somebody's going to leave. I don't have a contract in front of me, and neither does the public. Why? Because that's between the Harbor Station Commission and their tenant. Those details are beneficial for the public. Some have recently said that I've been political with this. I'll say this. Of course this is political. It's dealing with public money. That makes it political. Whenever we're dealing with public money, it's political decisions. We've had people around this table that have suggested very, very strongly, passionately, that we're broke. Period. We're broke, we're broke, we're broke. There's no money in the bank. We are broke. I've heard that a number of times. But we have money to subsidize private enterprise. We need a bigger strategy session on how we spend our money. We've been broadcasting loud and clear through this channel here that we're heading towards a financial cliff and that it's coming this way. Yet, on the other branch, we're asking our provincial partners to recognize our financial burden. And this discussion is suggesting that we have money to drop like a puck. Can we, on one hand, as time starts to pass and we head to bargaining tables, tell folks that we have no money for multiple collective agreements that are starting to come to a conclusion? And can we entertain closing rinks and putting folks through a participatory budgeting exercise that says that we are entertaining closing services or reducing services, and while doing that in the face of incredibly high water and sewerage rates and a property tax rate that outpaces everybody else, turn around and subsidize private for-profit enterprise? We should not be funding businesses, but developing, from my standpoint, from this seat, we should be developing policies and conditions for them to succeed, like lowering taxes, for instance. St. John, folks, I've always said, is a great place to live, work, play, and do business. And our value proposition is that we have a great city, and the people that live here are our best asset. The message being sent tonight is that our value proposition is that, look, come to City Hall and we could cut you a check for private enterprise. Consider for a moment in a city, some of us have talked about this even tonight, with a 33% poverty rate and an agency like ProKids, could those dollars be better used to help fund youth minor hockey, music and arts lessons? I can't support this. Our role, I will say again and echo it, is to set policies and grow conditions for private business to succeed. It's not to directly fund them. Staff have recommended here tonight that we do that. I can't support that. But I do find that we're talking out of both sides of our mouth when we say that we're absolutely broke over here, yet we're dropping money like a puck over here. This motion comes with little transparency by way of the contract that's already in place between the Harbor Station Commission and their tenant, yet we find ourselves at the table for this one. It's important, and Councillor Sullivan has already mentioned it, that we could be looking at a $400 increase for user fees if in fact what happens is we move ahead with user rate increases for those folks that are coming from outside of the city of St. John. We're sending a message here tonight. And the loudest message I hear is, where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line, folks? Do we draw the line at the Sea Dogs? Do we draw the line at the St. John Alpines? Do we draw the line at the Riptide? Where do we draw the line for subsidizing for-profit private enterprise? That's all for my round one.
Deputy?
Well, I just wanted to make an additional comment. I already spoke. I will be supporting the motion. You know, we have a lot of items and a lot of issues that we have to look at each week, and we have to make the best decisions that we can on the background information that we have to make the decisions with. But I wanted to explain that I'm not, you know, I don't feel that this council is leaving a burden for the next council, because from the growth committee, we have a reserve that we have and are able to spend on growth, what we feel is good growth for the city. And the 17.5, my understanding is that we're going to take that money and allot it out of the money that we have today. We're not going to leave it for the next 5 years. We'll set the money aside today so that we're not putting a burden on the future council. I just feel, and I just close by saying this, I mean, we all have our own opinions, and that's wonderful. I just feel that the Sea Dogs are a great growth project initiative for this city, and, you know, we weren't able to come together without making the decision that we're doing here tonight. And it's not just the Harbor Station deficit that we're trying to keep down, it's also, it's very good business for the uptown area and the businesses and the bars and the restaurants and everyone else. And there's just so many other fields, there's so many other spin-offs to having the hockey team in the city of St. John. So we have to do the best we can and make the best decisions, and that's where my decision's going to be, is that I will be supporting this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reardon?
Thank you, Your Worship. From this seat, once again, I have to look at what brings value, what we have for money. Recreation, I think, is important. Entertainment is important. Those are the amenities that bring people to your neighborhood. I think communities in bloom is important for us as well. So I have to weigh all those things when I'm looking at where are we going to spend taxpayers' dollars, and I have to be able to defend my decision. So I am going to support this. I think it's a reasonable investment to make. I'm not necessarily a huge hockey fan, but I do think it's good for St. John, and I think it does bring value. This council just committed, we just had a price. Now, the 17.5 for 5 years, I'm happy to give them 87.5 right now, if that would be more palatable so that we don't have to go into the next council. We have the money, it's in the growth budget. As far as what we spend our money on, we are looking at other recreational things as well. We just got a price for almost $400,000 to dredge the slip. I haven't got a boat, but you know, we're going to commit $200,000 to that, and that's great. Lots of people do have boats, but it's none of my neighbors. But Market Slip is my neighbor, so you know, I say, okay, well that will bring people here. That's good for tourism and all those other things. So that's the balance I'm trying to create when I'm sitting here and trying to figure out where I'll spend that money. So I'm going to support this tonight. I think like this came with this came with some big asks. One was to get a big sponsor, a naming sponsor. There's all kinds of things we asked the Sea Dogs to do, in exchange for this. They had to sign the 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think that that's fair ball, and so I'm going to support it tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think to echo what's been said around the table a few times, I will be supporting this, what's presented before us. I think for the big reason that I think it just simply, when you take the value test of it, the Sea Dogs add such considerable value to the city, whether it's to the neighborhood it's in or our larger community as a whole. And I think when we look at the vision for the city and what we want our city to look like in 5, 10, 15 years, I think having these opportunities for recreation, having these opportunities for entertainment are a huge part of that. And ensuring that we have a major tenant in Harbor Station is a big part of that. If we're at risk for losing such a significant tenant in a considerable asset to our city, we've got to be taking a second look at things, right? I mean, if you look at the other regions in the area, like take Moncton for example, they've seen what the asset we have in Harbor Station and copied it, right in the Avenir Center. And if we're at risk of losing a significant tenant like the Sea Dogs, I think we need to do everything in our power to stop it. If what's been said is that we're headed for this financial cliff. Well, when you're preparing for a situation like that in our sprint to a financial cliff, you don't just slow down to a jog. You're still going to end up over the cliff. You've got to turn around. And turning around means growth. And turning around means making sure that we're taking opportunities to growth. And the notion that it's a slippery slope, I think, is just ridiculous. Turning our financial position around as a city means growth, and that's exactly what that growth reserve fund is for. And in my eyes, the Sea Dogs mean growth, and I think protecting what we have means growth too. So I will be strongly in favor of this one, and I'm excited to see the Sea Dogs sign on for another years, and I hope there's another 5 years after that too. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Merrithew.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, great debate around the horseshoe. We should have this kind of debate anytime we give citizens' monies away, and I think it's all good to hear, quite frankly. When I think what's happening here, I'm just looking at. I firstly look kind of a return on our investment here, and the investment's not very big for a massive return. We do know that we're far better off with the Sea Dogs in Harbour Station than without them. That's an absolute. We weren't part of the negotiations with the Sea Dog. I don't think I'm telling tales out of school to tell you they were tough negotiations. And I think our intervention probably helped seal that deal. As David beside me here said, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to continue growth in our uptown core. Again, you'll see, you want to ask the restaurant owners and the hotel owners and the bar owners what kind of spin-off they see in game night or playoff night. It's massive for these people. So it does spin economic activity. There's no question, all right? So we do talk about other things like dredging a harbor, and I'm not sure that that kind of money, as Councillor Reardon said, would spin off the amount of money that a season with the Sea Dogs would spin off. But yet we're going to spend that as well, or I think we're going to spend it. So where it stops, I don't know. I again, good debate. I think we make a reasonable assessment that there is a very good return on your investment here, and with that, I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Strobridge.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support it too, but I was on the fence a little bit by it because initially I did see it as this is a for-profit sports team, and that. If I looked at it as black and white as that, I'd be like, sorry guys, you can't, if the public's not buying what you're selling, then tough. It's no different than if the corner store goes out of business. but it's not always that black and white. There's a lot. I will agree with what Councillor Norton said initially. He said there's not a lot of public transparency in this, and I would agree, because there's so much that we were presented with that the public doesn't know. And that bothers me, because I'm voting yes to this, and I have to be able to justify it, but I'm handcuffed by committee of the whole, because there's a lot of things that the public hasn't been told. But I do want to touch on a couple things that have been spoken by some of the other councillors. One of the things was, committing future councils to expenditures. Well, we do that all the time. The Safe Clean Drinking Water Project, we committed to that on last term. Councils from now and forever are going to be paying that one off. Another small example, the Canadian Tire Playground. We committed $200,000 to get a $1 million new playground. Again, legacy spending. The next council is going to have to manage that. So, we do that all the time when it comes to, we're faced with the decision and we're going to make it. End of story. As far as the public goes and policy and us getting involved in it, there was negotiations between the St. John Sea Dogs and Harbour Station. And Common Council is not involved in that. We don't run Harbour Station. We have a commission and staff there in place to do that. And there was an inability to come to an agreement. So it was escalated to your Common Council. It was put on our laps because two parties could not come together. And at the end of the day, as basically what it was told to us, and what I heard is, if we can't reach an agreement, the St. John Sea Dogs are leaving town. And they even gave us the name of another city where they were going. So for me, it was kind of like, if I have any power, if I have any ability to keep the Sea Dogs in the city of St. John, do I want to do that or don't I? Because that's basically what we were told. They said, if we can't reach an agreement with Harbour Station, adios, we're done. See you later, bye. You'll get one more year, and that's what we were told. Whether it was true or not, I don't know. I really didn't want to gamble and see if somebody was bluffing. So to the citizens of St. John, yeah, we have lots of other problems. Yes, there's lots of other things going wrong with the city. Yes, there's lots of other issues in the city, but this is about the Sea Dogs, and for this councillor, it was, do I want to see the Sea Dogs stay in St. John? And I would say the same thing to the public. Do you want them to stay or don't you? End of story, right? And some people can say, well, this is why they're great, and other people can argue, well, I wouldn't miss them if they were gone, but whatever. It was put in our lap. We didn't go searching for it. We were called, and some people even told us that they were directed to come to Common Council. It's out of the Growth Reserve Fund. We're not cutting money from another department to fund this. The money is already there. We see this as a growth initiative, and we're taking money out of that budget to help this team stay in the city. This is the team is part of the fabric of this city. It'd be the equivalent if the Toronto Maple Leafs left Toronto. That's what it would be the same as, only on a much smaller scale. But yes, I do wish that the public could have heard much more of the information that we were provided, and maybe they will later. I'm not sure, but I can't tell you because I'm handcuffed by committee of the whole, and I'll get in trouble. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to watch the time. So on this next and last round, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, and thank everybody to follow up on Councillor Merithew's comment. Actually, before he said it, I wrote down, isn't it cool to be part of a municipal government where we don't have parties and we're a party of one and we all get to say what we think? And the other thing that's really cool so far is I don't think there are many councils around that could disagree as much as we're disagreeing without water being poured. Right? Like, I just appreciate that it's a respectful and appropriate debate. So thank you for that. and again, it really is disagreeing on, I agree with so many points that people have said. With Councillor Strobridge talking about we can't talk about what we know, not only Committee of the Whole, I also sit on Harbour Station Commission, so I certainly have lots of knowledge and lots of background. But just to address a few of the points that I guess I disagree with. The point of what do we want the city to look at in 5, 10, 15 years? Do we want to have a hockey team? I think we want to have a hockey team. This is a negotiation, and if this is where it ends up to keep a hockey team, we'll still have a hockey team. St. John's, Newfoundland had an AHL team and lost it. They had a Q League team and lost it. They've got an East Coast team now and are doing quite well as far as I'm aware. There's assumptions that they would have left over this. There was an assumption many, many years ago that LNG wouldn't have come to St. John if we didn't have an agreement. They're negotiations, and we don't know for sure, and it's risk, and you gauge risk before you go into make decisions. And I guess I'm on the other side of that assumption as many of my council colleagues. Certainly, other experiences at other facilities. When one of their major tenants is left, for example, their hockey team is left, suddenly their basketball team had more people going, and there was more support there because people are looking for entertainment. Many people are looking for sports entertainment, whether it be basketball or hockey. The money, I agree, it's coming from the Growth Fund. The Growth Fund. The Growth Reserve Fund, thank you, Deputy. But it's not coming from a Growth Committee recommendation. Again, the policy around it, council puts money into reserves, council takes money out of reserves, but this Growth Fund, as I understood it when it was created, was something that the Growth Committee would look at and come back with recommendations. And I do know that from a process standpoint, this stayed with council throughout. Comment entertainment is important, I agree, and I guess I was remiss when I talked about the possibility for the Riptide and the Alpines to be coming. If that's the case, the Imperial Theatre, it's a regional asset, but when they come to the city of St. John, are we looking at funding them? Cineplex Odeon is certainly for profit. If they have a lean time, at what point in time do we entertain them coming to see us? I do believe in the slippery slope. We're a small city and people talk, and certainly, if this passes tonight, and it looks like it's going to, I will, as one councillor, will not be surprised if the phone starts ringing from other entities saying, okay, what have you got for us? So I hope we're prepared for that. Again, I really do appreciate the respectful dialogue and the respectful debate, but I'm not swayed by the argument, so thank you for that. I'll still be voting no.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last call, okay, thanks. I'll just, a couple of comments from me, thanks. So we are bound by, and thank you to everybody, because I was worried that somebody would go over a lot. No, I wasn't looking at you, just in general, that, we're bound by Committee of the Whole, and there's a lot of detail. I think the details of the lease should be a public document to suggest that they're not. They should be. I think is important, certainly. I think just a couple of highlights, for me. I think what we're dealing with tonight is in particular around the item around the Sea Dogs. They are a vital economic driver in the community, in my view. It is my opinion, and my opinion only, that if this deal wasn't done, that the risk far outweighed the benefit of sort of holding a line. I think on all the comments about, with respect, the Alpines and schools and other groups, that this council has to be able to differentiate between multi-million-dollar economic drivers and a school trip somewhere. So our ability to say, no, when it's not a multi-million-dollar ROI, I think is incredibly important. So, I think that's critical. And I would argue that we invest in for-profit businesses every day of the week. We invest in subsidizing building permit costs. We invest in developer incentives. We invest in heritage incentives. So, this is not anything new. How we got here, maybe we'd like to get here a little bit more smoothly in the future, but lots of economic spin-off here. $1 million to $1.5 million is estimated by the league, and I think versus the worst case scenario, the ROI on this is about 6 months. So we can all argue about who's speculating and who's not and what the outcome would be, but if I got to vote, I would certainly be supporting this. So I'll call the question. It's on the floor. All those in favor? Okay, and those contrary-minded? Okay, thank you. Motion's carried. Thank you. And 17.1 was essentially the same item, Common Clerk, so can we just consider it dealt with?
Receive and file would be
Okay,
fine.
thank you.
yeah.
Receive and file on 17.1. On the question, all those in favor? And contrary-minded, thank you. Motion's carried. Okay, and we have one more, 13?
The final item, Your Worship, 13.3, it's a Finance Committee report, and it's 2018 consolidated financial
Okay,
statements.
Councillor Merrithew, can you kick that off?
I will. Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It's recommended that council approve the St. John City consolidated financial statement, trust fund statements for 2018. If I've got a mover and a seconder, I'll speak to it very, very briefly. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I missed it.
Purpose
We
of the
have to
report.
switch that up once in a while, you two.
I know.
You two are like...
Bing bang tonight.
What we'll do is we'll take turns. It'll be Blake and Greg, and we'll come down. Okay. Okay, sorry, go ahead,
Your
Councillor.
Finance Committee met on May the 29th to review the draft consolidated financial statements for the City of St. John for the year ending December 31st, 2018, and Deloitte has completed an audit, a clean audit, expressed a clean audit opinion. So I know that council has seen these numbers before. We've looked at them a number of times. It's finally gone through our auditors. It's come back clean, so we're looking to pass it tonight. Sir.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I don't see the lights lit up. Deputy, you have a
I
question?
just have one little question. Like I see, you have like the Canada Games Foundation. Whenever we do the audit, for example, you keep their monies in our statements. And we legally do not own that money, and if they had to fold tomorrow, which they're not, but if they did, they have to give that money to another organization that will carry on what they do. And we used to do the same thing with St. John Nonprofit Housing. We'd put all their money into our financial statements. And I just think that when somebody reads it that's not familiar with the City of St. John, it's misleading, because we don't own that money either. Because if they had to fold up, they're separate from us now. But if they had to fold up, they have to give their money to another organization.
Why don't we ask the commissioner to jump in?
Have to turn around and look at it.
Oh, hold on, let me clear a mic. There you go, sir.
No, that's a good question. You'll notice on page 373 of your kit, it lists the entities that's consolidated on the financial statements. You'll notice this year, nonprofit housing is not one of those entities.
No, I know.
So the way this consolidation works from a financial perspective, it looks at elements of control, and control can mean a number of things. One, appointment to boards, financial control. So from a financial perspective, not a legal perspective, from a financial perspective, it's deemed to be a controlled entity for the City of St. John, and that's why it's consolidated into the financial statements.
And I sort of understand that, but I just feel that it's misleading, because we will never have access to their monies. So I'm just pointing that out.
Just a point. Okay, thank you.
I know we've been doing it that way for years, but.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to mention that, as Dave said, it's been recommended by Finance Committee. It's getting late. We're all exhausted from all that talking, which is all good. But Finance has gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, so it's all good to go. You have representation from Deloitte here as well, so if there's any questions, so it's all good.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, just to echo maybe a quick comment that Finance went through, the auditors presented to us During the Finance Committee meeting, there were no concerns raised. In fact, there was a significant amount of compliment to our finance team and you know, those not only here, but the tens of thousands watching at home should be feel a lot of confidence that a independent, world-class auditing team worked with our team and had check marks all over the page and gave your finance committee a lot of opportunity to drill in and ask lots of questions, and there was a lot of confidence there. So we thank you. Okay, great. I don't see any other mics, so we'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone contrary-minded? Okay, that's a unanimous vote, and again, thank you. Common Clerk, is that it? Can we stay longer if we want?
We can.
Is there a motion?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a great night.